A billionaire sits alone in an upscale restaurant, walls built so high around his heart that nothing gets through anymore. Then a woman in worn shoes walks up to his table and asks if he's her blind date. He knows she's made a mistake. He knows he should correct her. But when she sits down, exhausted, honest, completely unaware she's talking to one of the wealthiest men in the city, something inside him breaks open. What happens next will shatter everything. Both of them thought they knew about second chances. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The restaurant was the kind of place where silence costs more than noise. Soft jazz drifted through air that smelled of expensive wine and seared duck, candles flickering on tables spaced far enough apart that conversation stayed private, white tablecloths, crystal glasses catching light. The kind of establishment where people came to be seen, or more accurately, to remind themselves they'd made it. Daniel Hayes sat alone at a corner table, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 7:42. Marcus was late. Not unusual. His business partner had a habit of treating time like a suggestion rather than a commitment. But tonight Daniel didn't mind the wait. It gave him space to think, to breathe, to exist without performing the role everyone expected of him. He reached for his water glass, the ice already half melted, and let his gaze drift across the restaurant. Couples leaning close over candlelight. A group of business associates laughing too loud over their fourth round of drinks. An older woman dining alone, absorbed in a book. Normal people doing normal things. Daniel couldn't remember the last time his life felt normal. 32 years old, and he'd already lived 3 lifetimes. Built an empire from nothing, married the love of his life, became a father, lost everything that mattered in a single night 3 years ago when Emma's car hydroplaned on a rain-slicked highway. The company kept growing. His son kept growing. But Daniel himself had stopped somewhere along the way, frozen in the moment he got that phone call, trapped in the space between before and after. He ran a hand through dark hair that probably needed cutting and tried to focus on the menu he'd already memorized. Marcus had called this meeting something about a new venture, some opportunity that couldn't wait. Daniel had learned to expect vague urgency from his partner. Half the time it was legitimate. The other half, Marcus just wanted company for dinner and didn't want to eat alone. "Sir?" The voice came from his left, soft, uncertain, with the kind of tiredness that ran bone deep. Daniel looked up. A woman stood beside his table, hands clasped in front of her like she was trying to hold herself together. Early 30s, he guessed. Brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame a face that might have been striking if exhaustion wasn't written across every feature. She wore a navy dress that had seen better days, clean but faded, the hem slightly uneven like it had been altered by hand. Shoes that were practical rather than fashionable. No jewelry except a thin silver chain around her neck. Everything about her screamed that she didn't belong here. Are you my blind date?" Daniel blinked. "I'm sorry?" The blind date. She shifted her weight, uncomfortable. "I'm supposed to meet someone here at 7:30, table 12. I'm running late, I know. The bus took forever, and then I got turned around trying to find this place, and I—" She stopped herself, took a breath. "Is this table 12? He glanced at the small number placard near the candle. 12. "It is, but I'm not—" "Oh, thank God." The relief in her voice was palpable. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down before he could finish his sentence, dropping a worn purse onto the empty seat beside her. "I was so worried I'd gotten the wrong place entirely. My mother set this up and she gave me this address, and I've never been to this part of the city before, and everything looks the same, all these tall buildings and—" She cut herself off again, seemed to realize she was rambling. "Sorry, I'm nervous, obviously." Daniel opened his mouth to correct the misunderstanding, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, direct, honest, with no recognition flickering in her eyes. No calculation, no awareness of who he was or what he was worth. She saw a man in a suit at a table. Nothing more. Maybe it was the sheer absurdity of the situation. Or maybe in some broken part of himself he didn't want to examine too closely, he just didn't want to be alone. "It's fine," he heard himself say. "Traffic is terrible this time of night." "I took the bus, actually." She laughed, self-conscious. "I don't have a car. Haven't been able to afford one in, well, a while." She seemed to catch herself, like she'd revealed too much. But that's probably not great blind date conversation, is it? Talking about money problems in the first 30 seconds. Probably not traditional, Daniel agreed, a strange lightness tugging at the corner of his mouth. Something that wasn't quite a smile, but had been heading that direction before he shut it down. She relaxed slightly, shoulders dropping half an inch. I'm Ava. Ava Collins. Daniel. No last name. He wasn't ready to detonate that particular bomb yet. Nice to meet you, Daniel. She reached for the water glass the server had placed in front of her, took a long drink. When she set it down, he noticed her hands. Working hands. Short nails, a small scar across her left knuckle, calluses on her fingertips. These weren't the hands of someone who spent their days in boardrooms or spa treatments. A server appeared beside their table, young and professionally pleasant. Good evening. Can I start you both with drinks? Ava opened her mouth, closed it, glanced at the wine list like it was written in another language. Just water is fine for me. We'll have a bottle of the Bordeaux, Daniel said smoothly. The 2015. The server nodded and disappeared. Ava looked uncomfortable. I don't really drink wine. I mean, I do sometimes, but nothing fancy. And I probably can't tell the difference between expensive and cheap anyway, so you didn't have to. It's fine. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her. This close, he could see the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her dress pulled slightly at the shoulders like she'd lost weight since buying it. When's the last time you ate? The question seemed to surprise her. I had lunch. When? Noon? It's almost 8. Yeah, well. She shrugged, trying for casual and missing. Busy day. I work 2 jobs and sometimes the timing doesn't line up for proper meals. But I'm fine, really. I'm not one of those girls who pretend she doesn't eat on dates. Daniel caught the server's eye and gestured him over. We'll start with the mushroom appetizer and the burrata, and bring the lady a bread basket. Of course, sir. Ava waited until the server left before fixing Daniel with a look that was half gratitude, half embarrassment. You didn't have to do that. You're hungry. I'm also supposed to be making a good impression, not looking like someone who can't afford to feed herself. She stopped, seemed to hear her own words. Which I can. Afford to feed myself. Priorities shift sometimes, and rent is more important than fancy groceries, and she pressed her lips together. I'm doing the rambling thing again, aren't I? A little? Sorry, I do that when I'm nervous. Why are you nervous? Ava laughed, a real sound this time, tinged with exhaustion and something darker. Because my mother has been on my case for 2 years about finding someone, anyone, to settle down with. Because I'm 30 years old and still living paycheck to paycheck with nothing to show for it. Because this, she gestured around the restaurant, this isn't my world and we both know it. I don't fit here. Honesty, raw and unpolished and completely unexpected. Daniel found himself leaning forward slightly. Why did you come then? Because she wore me down. Ava met his eyes. My mother. She's persistent. And she means well, even when it feels suffocating. She set this whole thing up through a friend of a friend, said this guy was established and looking for something real, and that I should at least give it a chance because what did I have to lose? She paused. So here I am, giving it a chance. The wine arrived. The server poured with practiced precision, left the bottle, retreated. Ava picked up her glass, stared at the dark liquid like it held answers. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Oh, why are you here? What made you agree to a blind date? Because I didn't, Daniel thought. Because this is a mix-up, and I should tell you that right now and end this before it goes any further. But instead he said, someone suggested it might be good for me to meet new people. Not technically a lie. Marcus was always suggesting Daniel get back out there, stop living like a ghost, find someone. Daniel always ignored him. But the words fit close enough to truth that he didn't feel like a complete fraud saying them. And is it? Ava asked. Good for you? I don't know yet. She smiled at that. Small, but genuine. Fair enough. The appetizers arrived. Daniel watched as Ava's eyes widened slightly at the presentation. The mushrooms roasted to perfection, the burrata drizzled with olive oil and scattered with herbs. The bread basket still steaming. She took a piece of bread, tore it in half, Didn't pretend to be delicate about it. This is incredible. You haven't tasted it yet. I can tell just by looking. She took a bite, closed her eyes briefly. Okay, yeah, definitely incredible. Daniel found himself picking up his own piece of bread, something he rarely did. He usually ate because his body required fuel, not because food gave him any pleasure. But watching Ava's unguarded enjoyment of something so simple made him want to remember what that felt like. Tell me about your jobs, he said. You mentioned 2. Ava swallowed, reached for her water. I work at a coffee shop in the mornings, Cornerstone, over on 5th. Then 3 afternoons a week I clean offices downtown. The pay isn't great at either place, but together they cover rent and bills, and most of the time that's enough. Most of the time? Some months are tighter than others. She spread butter on another piece of bread with careful precision, making it last. My building raised rent last year. Nothing I could do about it except figure out how to make more or spend less. I chose less. That can't be easy. It's not about easy. Ava met his eyes again, that directness that kept catching him off guard. It's about surviving. You do what you have to do. Daniel recognized that philosophy. He'd built his entire company on it. Do what needs to be done, regardless of cost, regardless of how it feels. Results were all that mattered. Except somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten that survival and living weren't the same thing. What about you? Ava asked, breaking him from his thoughts. What do you do? Here it was, the moment to either come clean or dig deeper. I work in business development. Not a lie. Vague enough to be meaningless, specific enough to sound legitimate. That sounds important. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just meetings about meetings. She laughed. I think I'd lose my mind in an office all day. What would you rather be doing? The question seemed to catch her unprepared. She went still, bread halfway to her mouth, something flickering across her face that looked like old dreams being pulled from storage. I don't know anymore, she said quietly. I used to have all these plans. College, career, making something of myself. But then my dad got sick and the medical bills piled up, and I had to drop out to help with expenses. And by the time he passed, I was so far behind I couldn't catch up. Life just happened. And now I'm here, serving coffee and cleaning other people's offices, and I can't remember what I wanted to be when I grew up. The weight in her words settled between them. Daniel understood that weight, carried his own version of it. I'm sorry about your father, he said. It was 5 years ago. Ava took a sip of wine, made a face that suggested she still wasn't used to the taste. You'd think it would hurt less by now, but grief doesn't work on a schedule, does it? No. Daniel's voice came out rougher than intended. It doesn't. Something in his tone made Ava look at him more closely. You've lost someone. Not a question. He nodded once. I'm sorry, she said simply. No prying questions, no awkward platitudes, just acknowledgement. They ate in silence for a moment, not uncomfortable. Just 2 people who understood that some things didn't need to be explained. The main courses arrived. Daniel hadn't even realized they'd ordered, but the server must have taken cues from their choices earlier. Seared salmon for Ava, steak for him. She looked at her plate like she'd been given a piece of art she wasn't sure she should touch. This is too much, she said. It's dinner. This is someone's rent money on a plate. Daniel paused, fork halfway to the salmon he'd been about to cut. Does that bother you? Honestly? A little. Ava picked up her knife and fork, hands steady despite her words. But I'm also not going to waste it. That would be worse. They ate. She asked him questions, surface-level things about his favorite books, whether he preferred the city or the country, what he did for fun. He answered carefully, revealing nothing substantial while making it sound like he was being open. Years of practiced evasion. But Ava answered his questions with unfiltered honesty. She talked about the regular customers at the coffee shop who'd become familiar faces in her life. The woman who always ordered a triple espresso and left exactly $1 in tips. The old man who came in every Thursday and told the same stories about his late wife. The teenager working up the courage to come out to his parents who practiced his speech while Ava steamed milk. She talked about the buildings she cleaned after dark, the empty offices that told stories through the things people left on their desks. Photos of kids, motivational quotes, Coffee mugs with clever sayings that probably didn't feel clever after the 40th meeting of the week. You notice things, Daniel observed. When you're invisible, you see a lot. Ava pushed rice around her plate. People don't look at the person making their coffee or cleaning their office. They look through them. So you learn to watch, to read situations. You figure out who's having a bad day, who needs space, who wants to chat. It's survival, really. The better you read people, the better tips you get, the fewer complaints you deal with. You don't like being invisible. She considered that. I don't know. Sometimes it's easier. You can't disappoint people who don't see you. Daniel set down his fork. That's a bleak way to look at it. Maybe, Ava met his eyes, but it's honest. And I figure if we're sitting here on a blind date my mother forced me into, eating food I can't afford while pretending to be someone I'm not, I might as well be honest about something. The admission hung between them. You're not pretending, Daniel said. Aren't I? She gestured at herself. This dress is from a thrift store. I practiced walking in these heels for 3 days because I never wear them. I watched YouTube videos on how to hold a wine glass correctly. I'm absolutely pretending. You're adapting. That's different. Is it? Daniel thought about his own life. The suits that cost more than Ava made in a month. The practiced smile he wore in meetings. The version of himself he presented to the world that bore little resemblance to the hollow man who went home every night to an empty house and a son who deserved a better father. Maybe not, he admitted. Ava laughed, surprising him. Well, at least you're honest about it. They finished their meals, declined dessert. The server brought the check in a leather folder, set it discreetly beside Daniel's elbow without looking at it. Ava reached for her purse. We should split it. No. I can pay my half. I'm sure you can. Daniel pulled out his card without opening the folder, handed it to the hovering server. But you're not going to. She looked like she wanted to argue, then seemed to think better of it. Thank you. You're welcome. The server returned with the receipt. Daniel signed it, adding a tip that would probably cover Ava's rent. Old habits. When you had more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes, percentages stopped meaning anything. They stood. Ava gathered her purse, smoothed her dress in a gesture that suggested she was preparing to leave, to let this night end and return to her regular life. Daniel should let her, should thank her for the unexpected evening, watch her walk away, and forget this ever happened. Instead, he heard himself say, Would you like to walk for a bit? There's a park 2 blocks over. Ava hesitated, glanced at her phone. I should probably get back. I have to open the coffee shop at 5 tomorrow. How long would it take you to get home? About 45 minutes on the bus. Daniel checked his watch. 9:30. 1 walk, 20 minutes. I'll make sure you get home safely after. She studied him, that direct gaze that seemed to see past all his careful construction. Why? Because I'm not ready for this to be over yet. Truth. Raw and unplanned and more vulnerable than he'd been with anyone in 3 years. Ava's expression softened. Okay, 20 minutes. They walked out into the night. The temperature had dropped, autumn settling into the city with the promise of winter behind it. Ava wrapped her arms around herself, and Daniel noticed she hadn't brought a jacket. He shrugged out of his suit coat, draped it over her shoulders before she could protest. You don't have to. I know. She pulled the coat tighter, swimming in fabric that had been tailored to his frame. Thank you. They walked in silence for half a block. The city moved around them, cars passing, people heading to bars or theaters or home. Daniel couldn't remember the last time he'd walked through the city without purpose, without a destination. Can I tell you something? Ava said eventually. Of course. This wasn't what I expected. She kept her eyes forward. When my mom said she'd set me up with someone established, I figured it would be some middle-aged guy looking for someone to cook and clean and make him feel important. Someone who wanted arm candy, or a mother for kids from a previous marriage. Someone who saw me as a solution to a problem rather than a person. That's specific. That's experience. Ava kicked a pebble, watched it skitter across the sidewalk. I've been on dates before. Not many, but enough. And they all had the same feeling, like I was being interviewed for a position I didn't apply for, like my value was measured by what I could provide rather than who I was. And tonight, she slowed her pace, turned to look at him. The streetlight caught her face at an angle, shadows and light dividing her features. Tonight you asked me questions like you actually wanted to know the answers. You didn't try to impress me or make me feel small, you just talked to me. Like I was real. The simplicity of it hit him square in the chest. When had that become unusual? When had basic decency become noteworthy? You are real, Daniel said. So are you. Ava smiled. Which is harder to find than you'd think. They reached the park. Small, probably not worth noticing during the day, but at night it transformed into something almost peaceful. Trees creating shadows, a fountain that still ran despite the season, benches positioned along paths that curved through carefully maintained greenery. They sat on a bench facing the fountain. Ava pulled Daniel's coat tighter around herself, breathed out slowly. My mom is going to ask me 100 questions tomorrow, she said. How it went, what we talked about, whether I think there'll be a second date. She means well, but it's exhausting. What are you going to tell her? I don't know yet. Ava leaned back, tipped her head to look at the sky. Light pollution made it impossible to see stars, but she looked anyway. Part of me wants to tell her it was terrible, just so she'll stop setting me up with people. But that wouldn't be fair to you. Was it terrible? No. She brought her gaze back down. It was actually really nice, which makes it worse in a way. How so? Because nice doesn't pay bills. Ava's voice went quiet. Because I can't afford to get caught up in maybes and what-ifs when I'm barely keeping my head above water. Because even if tonight was good, even if you wanted to see me again, we're from completely different worlds, and that gap doesn't close just because we had a pleasant dinner. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that money didn't matter, that connections were built on more than economic compatibility, that what mattered was whether two people understood each other. But he couldn't say any of that without revealing who he was. And the moment he did that, everything would change. What if I wanted to see you again anyway? He asked. Ava looked at him like he'd said something in a foreign language. Why would you? Because you're honest. Because you notice things. Because you talk to me like a person instead of a position. He echoed her own words back at her. That's harder to find than you'd think. She ducked her head, hair falling forward to hide a smile. Now you're just being nice. I'm being honest. People say that a lot, usually right before they prove they're not. I'm not other people. No, Ava agreed, studying him with that unsettling directness. I don't think you are. A phone buzzed. Ava pulled hers from her purse, checked the screen, frowned. Problem? Daniel asked. Just the bus schedule. Last one on my route leaves in 30 minutes. If I miss it, I'm walking 2 miles. She stood, started to shrug out of his jacket. I should go. Daniel stood as well, gently pushed the jacket back onto her shoulders. Keep it for now. I'll get you home. You don't have to, Ava. He waited until she met his eyes. Let me get you home safely, please. Something in his tone, maybe the sincerity, maybe the quiet insistence, made her stop arguing. Okay. He pulled out his phone, sent a quick text. Within 2 minutes, a black car pulled up to the curb. Not his usual driver, that would have raised too many questions, but a service he used occasionally when anonymity mattered more than convenience. Ava stared at the car. That was fast. I know people. They slid into the back seat. Daniel gave the driver her address, an apartment building in a part of the city he knew had been struggling with rising crime and falling property values for years. The kind of place landlords milked for profit while maintenance requests went ignored. The drive took 20 minutes through light traffic. Ava sat quietly, watching the city pass outside her window. Occasionally, she'd touch the fabric of his jacket, like she was memorizing the texture of something she knew she'd have to give back. When they pulled up to her building, Daniel could see what he'd expected. Faded brick, cracked concrete steps, a door that probably stuck in its frame, lights that flickered in the third-floor hallway. Ava reached for the door handle. Thank you for tonight. Really, it was... She paused, searching for words. It was nice to feel like someone saw me. I'd like to see you again, Daniel said. She turned back, surprise clear on her face. Seriously? Seriously. Why? Because I haven't had a conversation that real in years. Because you made me forget to check my watch. Because... He stopped himself before he said too much. Because I'd like to. Ava bit her lip, uncertain. I don't have a lot of free time. Between both jobs and trying to keep my life from falling apart, dating isn't exactly a priority. Then let's not call it dating. Let's call it coffee. I make coffee for a living. Then you're the expert. You can tell me where to find the best cup in the city. A smile tugged at her mouth. That's a terrible line. Is it working? Maybe a little. She pulled out her phone. Give me your number. I'll text you my schedule and we can figure something out. They exchanged numbers, real ones, not fake ones meant to be blocked later. Daniel watched as she saved his contact with just his first name, Daniel. No last name, no title, just a person she'd met who wanted to see her again. She opened the car door, paused halfway out. Hey, Daniel. Yeah? Tonight was good. Whatever happens next, I'm glad we did this. So am I. She climbed out, started up the steps to her building, then turned back one more time. Your jacket. Keep it for now. Return it next time. That's presumptuous. That's optimistic. Ava laughed, shook her head, but didn't argue. She gave a small wave, disappeared through the building's entrance. Daniel waited until he saw lights come on in a third-floor window before telling the driver to go. His phone buzzed before they'd gone 2 blocks. A text from Marcus. Where are you? Thought we were meeting tonight. Daniel stared at the message, felt something cold settle in his gut. Marcus had arranged tonight, table 12 at 7:30, which meant his phone rang. Marcus not patient enough to wait for a text response. Daniel answered, I'm in the car. Dude, where were you? I waited at the restaurant for 45 minutes before I gave up. Did you forget? What restaurant? Belmont's, where we always meet when you want to talk business. Table 12. You said 7:30. Daniel's mind raced, pieces sliding into place with sickening clarity. Belmont's. Table 12. 7:30. But he'd been at Marseille, same time, same table number, different restaurant. Daniel, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. What happened? I went to the wrong place. Truth and lie tangled together. Must have mixed up the names. Marcus laughed. Getting old, man. So what, you just sat alone for an hour? Something like that. Not technically a lie. He had been alone until he wasn't. Well, we can reschedule. I wanted to talk to you about this new candidate for the executive assistant position. Really promising. Great instincts, reads people well, adapts to situations like a pro. I had her do a test run tonight, sent her to a restaurant for a fake blind date just to see how she'd handle an awkward social situation. Figured it would be a good gauge of her people skills. Daniel's blood went cold. What restaurant? Marseille, why? The pieces locked together with brutal finality. Ava hadn't been at the wrong place. She'd been exactly where she was supposed to be. For a test. For a job interview she didn't know she was taking. For an evaluation that had nothing to do with dating and everything to do with Daniel's company. Daniel, you okay? Fine. His voice sounded distant even to himself. What happened with the candidate? No idea. I gave her the address and told her someone would be waiting. Haven't heard back yet. Probably went terribly. These things usually do. But it's a good filter. If she can't handle a surprise blind date, she definitely can't handle you on a bad day. Marcus kept talking, but Daniel stopped listening. Ava thought she'd been on a date. She'd been honest, vulnerable, real, and the whole time it had been a setup. Not for her. She was innocent in this. But Daniel had let her believe a lie, had taken her honesty and given her deception in return. I need to go, Daniel said, cutting Marcus off mid-sentence. Everything okay? Yeah, just remembered something I need to handle. He ended the call, stared at his phone. Ava's number glowed on the screen, saved under a contact that just said Ava. He should tell her. Should explain the misunderstanding, apologize, laugh it off as a bizarre coincidence. Instead, he pressed his phone against his forehead and tried to figure out how he'd managed to make a mistake that would inevitably hurt someone who'd already been hurt enough. The car pulled up to his house, not home, never home, just the place where he lived. 20 rooms for 2 people, more space than anyone needed, empty in ways that had nothing to do with furniture. Daniel climbed out, stood in his driveway, looked up at windows that showed no signs of life. His phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Made it home safe. Thanks again for tonight. It was really nice. Let me know when you're free for that coffee. He stared at the message. He should come clean. Right now, before this went any further. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved away. Tomorrow, he told himself. He'd explain everything tomorrow when he could think clearly, when he wasn't exhausted and conflicted and feeling things he hadn't let himself feel in years. Tomorrow he'd fix this. Tonight, he just wanted to hold on to the memory of sitting across from someone who saw him as Daniel, nothing more, nothing less. Just a person. Not a billionaire, not a CEO, not a widower drowning in grief and responsibility. Just Daniel. He'd forgotten what that felt like. And now that he remembered, he wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. Even though he knew he should. Even though keeping quiet made him complicit in a deception that would only grow worse the longer it continued. Even though Ava deserved better. Daniel pocketed his phone, walked into his empty house, and tried not to think about all the ways this was going to end badly. Because some part of him, the part that had come alive for the first time in 3 years during a mistaken blind date, didn't care about consequences. That part just wanted to see her again. And that part, Daniel was starting to realize, was stronger than all his careful logic and practiced control, which should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the first real thing he'd experienced since the night Emma died, and he wasn't strong enough to walk away from that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as headlights from passing cars swept across the room. His phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark, but he could feel its presence like a weight pressing against his chest. He'd drafted 6 different messages to Ava, deleted them all. Each one started the same way. I need to tell you something, and spiraled from there into explanations that sounded worse the more he tried to justify them. There was no version of this conversation that didn't make him look like exactly the kind of person she'd described hating, someone who saw her as a solution to a problem, someone conducting an evaluation while she thought they were having a real moment. By the time dawn broke through his bedroom window, Daniel had convinced himself he'd tell her everything over coffee, face to face, like an adult who took responsibility for his mistakes, even the accidental ones. Then his phone rang at 6:30. Marcus, because of course it was. "Did you look at the candidate file I sent over?" Marcus asked without preamble. "The one for the executive assistant position?" Daniel sat up, ran a hand through his hair. "Haven't checked my email yet." "Well, check it. I'm telling you, this woman is perfect. 30 years old, worked her way up from nothing, knows how to read people, adapts on the fly. Exactly what you need." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What's her name?" "Ava Collins. She doesn't know it yet, but after last night's test, I'm convinced she's the one. I'm setting up a formal interview for tomorrow. You available at 2? The room tilted slightly. "What test?" Daniel asked, even though he already knew. "The blind date thing I mentioned. I had someone sit at table 12 at Marseille, told Ava she was meeting a potential romantic match. Figured if she could handle an awkward social situation with grace, she could handle anything we threw at her. My guy said she was nervous but composed, asked good questions, didn't try too hard to impress. That's exactly the kind of temperament we need." Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. "Your guy?" "Yeah, I hired an actor, gave him some basic talking points, told him to see how she handled herself. He said the whole thing went smoothly. She's got potential." An actor, table 12. But Daniel had been at table 12, which meant, "Marcus, what time did you tell your actor to be there?" 7:30. Why? "And what time did you tell Ava?" "Same, 7:30. A pause. "Why are you asking?" Daniel closed his eyes. "Because I think there was a mix-up." "What kind of mix-up?" "I was at Marseille last night. Table 12, 7:30. Silence on the other end. Then slowly, "You're kidding." "I wish I was." "So you—" Marcus stopped, seemed to be processing. "Wait, you met Ava? You were the date?" "It wasn't supposed to be a date for me. I was there waiting for you. She thought I was her blind date. I thought—" Daniel trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence. "What did you think?" "I don't know, that the universe was playing a joke, that it didn't matter because I'd never see her again." He stood, paced to the window. "I didn't know it was a setup for a job interview." Marcus let out a low whistle. Well, this is awkward. That's one word for it. Does she know who you are? No, I gave her my first name only. She has no idea. Okay? Marcus shifted into problem-solving mode, the same tone he used during crisis management meetings. Okay, this is fixable. We tell her the truth, explain the misunderstanding, have a laugh about it, and move forward with the interview. She seems like the type who'd appreciate the honesty. Or she'll think we manipulated her. Did you? No, but then there's nothing to worry about. It's a funny story, bizarre coincidence. These things happen. Daniel wanted to believe that, wanted to think Ava would see the humor in the situation and move past it, but he kept remembering the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she'd talked about being invisible, about people seeing through her, the trust she'd offered when she didn't have to. I'll handle it, Daniel said. You want me to cancel the interview? No, just give me time to talk to her first. How much time? A day? Maybe 2. Marcus hesitated. We need to fill this position. If she's as good as I think she is, we can't afford to lose her because you're feeling guilty about an accident. I'm not losing her. I'm being honest with her. Fine. But Daniel? Yeah? Don't screw this up. Good assistants are hard to find. And from what my fake date guy told me, she's got real potential. Daniel ended the call, tossed his phone onto the bed. Potential. That's what Ava was to Marcus. To the company. A resource to be evaluated and utilized. But to Daniel, sitting in that restaurant listening to her talk about invisible lives and survival and the weight of just getting through each day, she'd been something else entirely. She'd been real. And now he had to figure out how to tell her that everything about last night had been built on a misunderstanding without destroying whatever fragile connection they'd started to build. He checked his phone. No new messages from Ava. Good. That gave him time to think. He showered, dressed, went through the motions of getting ready for a day he had no interest in living through. Downstairs, his son Ethan was already at the kitchen table, cereal bowl in front of him, tablet propped up playing some cartoon Daniel didn't recognize. 7 years old and already fluent in the language of distraction. Morning, buddy, Daniel said, pouring coffee he didn't want. Ethan glanced up, nodded, went back to his show. They'd become experts at existing in the same space without really connecting. Daniel told himself it was temporary, that they were both still grieving, that eventually they'd find their way back to each other. 3 years later, he was still telling himself the same lie. His phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Hey, I have a break between jobs today around 11 if you're free. There's a coffee shop near the park we went to last night. My treat this time. Daniel stared at the message. He should tell her no. Should explain everything via text so she had time to process without him standing there watching her expression change, from trust to betrayal. Instead, he typed, I'll be there. Send me the address. The coffee shop was called Daily Grind, and it occupied a corner storefront that had probably been 12 different businesses over the past decade. The kind of place that survived on local loyalty rather than tourist traffic, with mismatched chairs and art from local artists covering the walls. Daniel arrived 10 minutes early and immediately felt overdressed in his tailored suit. Everyone else wore jeans and hoodies, the uniform of people who worked with their hands or didn't work in offices. Ava was already there, sitting at a small table near the window. She'd changed out of last night's dress into practical clothes, dark jeans, a simple blue sweater, her hair pulled back in the same ponytail. She looked tired but alert, a coffee cup already empty in front of her. She waved when she saw him, and something in Daniel's chest twisted. He crossed to her table, sat down in the chair that wobbled slightly. You came, she said, like she'd half expected him not to. I said I would. People say a lot of things. She pushed a second coffee cup toward him. I got you a regular coffee. Figured after last night's wine you might want something simple. Thank you. He took a sip. It was good. Better than the expensive espresso machine in his office produced. Ava watched him, nervous energy radiating off her in waves. So I need to tell you something, and I'm just going to say it because if I don't say it now, I'll lose my nerve. Daniel's stomach dropped. Okay. Last night wasn't actually a blind date. I mean, it was for me, but it wasn't real. She spoke quickly, words tumbling over each other. My mom's friend works with this company, and they were looking for someone for some job, And apparently they do this weird test thing where they send you to a fake date to see how you handle yourself. And I thought it was real, but it wasn't. And I feel like an idiot for not realizing it sooner. She stopped, took a breath. Daniel sat very still. When did you find out? This morning. The friend called my mom to set up a real interview and mentioned how well the test went last night. And my mom was confused because she thought I was on an actual date. And Ava pressed her hands flat on the table. It's so stupid. I'm 30 years old and my mother is still trying to manage my life, and I let her because I'm too tired to fight back, and now I've wasted your time on what was apparently a job interview I didn't know I was taking. But Daniel should have felt relief. She'd found out on her own. He didn't have to tell her. Instead, he felt worse. You didn't waste my time, he said. I kind of did, though. You thought you were on a real date, and instead you got... She gestured at herself. Whatever this was. Ava. She stopped, met his eyes. I didn't think I was on a real date, Daniel said carefully. I thought I was meeting my business partner. Table 12 at a restaurant. But I went to the wrong place. Her expression shifted from embarrassment to confusion. You went to the wrong restaurant. Yeah. So you weren't there for a date at all? No. Then why did you... She stopped, seemed to replay the previous night in her head. Why didn't you correct me when I sat down? This was it, the moment to come clean. Because you looked exhausted and honest, and I hadn't had a real conversation in years, and I was selfish enough to want to see where it went. Ava leaned back in her chair, processing. So we were both there by accident. Looks that way. And we both just went with it. Yeah. She started laughing. Not polite laughter, but real, from the gut laughter that made other customers glance over. That's insane. Little bit. I mean, what are the odds? She wiped her eyes. I'm supposed to be on a fake date for a job interview. You're supposed to be meeting your business partner. We both end up at the same table and just roll with it like that's normal. Not very high odds, Daniel agreed. And now I have a real interview tomorrow for whatever job last night was supposed to be testing me for, which is weird because I don't even know what the position is. She sobered slightly. Do you think I should go? Daniel's throat went dry. Do you want to? I don't know. Part of me is insulted they felt the need to test me without telling me. But part of me is desperate enough for a better opportunity that I don't care how I get it. She traced the rim of her coffee cup. What would you do? Tell her the truth. Tell her right now before this gets worse. I'd go to the interview, he said. See what they're offering. Make a decision based on information rather than assumptions. That's very rational. I have my moments. Ava checked her phone, frowned at the time. I have to get to work in 20 minutes, but before I go, I need to know something. What? Last night. Was any of it real for you, or were you just being polite to someone who'd clearly made a mistake? Daniel could have deflected, could have given some vague answer that protected them both. Instead, he said, It was the most real thing I've experienced in 3 years. The honesty in his voice made Ava go still. Okay, she said quietly. Good to know. They sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the coffee shop fading into background static. I should go, Ava said, but didn't move. Yeah. Will I see you again? Or was this just a weird accident we'll both forget about in a week? Daniel knew what he should say. Should let her go, let her take the interview without knowing who he was, give her the chance to make a clean decision. But sitting across from her in this coffee shop with its wobbly chairs and local art, watching her try to figure out if last night had meant something or nothing, he couldn't bring himself to lie. I'd like to see you again, he said. Even though it started as a mistake? Maybe especially because it started as a mistake. Ava smiled, small but genuine. I have the interview tomorrow at 2. After that, I'm free. If you want to do something that's actually intentional this time. I'd like that. She stood, gathered her bag. Halfway to the door, she turned back. Hey, Daniel. Yeah? I'm glad you went to the wrong restaurant. Then she was gone, disappearing into the midday crowd. Daniel sat alone at the wobbling table, coffee going cold in his hands, and tried to figure out how he'd managed to make everything exponentially more complicated in the span of 20 minutes. He pulled out his phone, called Marcus. Tell me you fixed it, Marcus said by way of greeting. Not exactly. What does that mean? It means she found out about the interview set up on her own. Thinks last night was a fake date for a job test. Which it was. Which it was, Daniel agreed. But she doesn't know I have anything to do with the company. She thinks I was just some random guy at the wrong table. Are you going to tell her? Daniel watched through the window as Ava waited at a bus stop, checking her phone. Not yet. Daniel, I know it's a mess, but I need to figure out how to handle this without destroying what we started. What you started was based on a misunderstanding. So is half of everything worthwhile. Marcus sighed. Fine. But when this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you. Daniel ended the call, left money on the table. Too much, but he wasn't thinking clearly, and walked out into a day that felt both impossibly bright and completely wrong. His phone buzzed with calendar reminders. Meetings he didn't care about. Decisions that needed to be made. The endless machinery of running a business that never stopped, never slowed down, never cared that he was one mistake away from ruining something he hadn't even known he wanted until 48 hours ago. He should go to the office, should focus on work, and let this thing with Ava fade into the category of interesting stories you tell at parties. Instead, he found himself driving across town to his son's school. Ethan's classroom was on the second floor, windows facing the playground. Daniel stood in the hallway, watching through the narrow window in the door as his son sat at a small desk, head bent over some assignment, completely absorbed. 7 years old and already learning to be alone. Daniel had done that, had taught his son through example that the proper response to loss was isolation, that feelings were liabilities, that the safest way to live was behind walls so high nothing could reach you. And now, for the first time since Emma died, those walls had a crack in them. Because of a woman who made coffee for a living and cleaned offices and talked about being invisible like it was just another fact of life. Because of a mistake that had somehow become the most honest thing Daniel had done in years. Mr. Hayes? Daniel turned. Ethan's teacher stood in the hallway, tablet in hand, expression professionally neutral. Hi, Ms. Peterson. Is everything all right? We don't usually see you during school hours. Just had some free time, thought I'd check in. She nodded, didn't quite believe him, but was too polite to push. Ethan's doing well, a little quiet, but he's keeping up with his work. He's always been quiet. Has he always been this withdrawn? The question landed like a punch. Daniel looked back through the window. Ethan had finished his assignment and now sat perfectly still, waiting for instructions. I don't know, Daniel admitted. I think I stopped noticing. Miss Peterson softened slightly. Kids his age need connection. Structure is important, but so is emotional engagement. He needs to know it's okay to feel things. I'll work on that. Mr. Hayes. She waited until he looked at her. With all due respect, I don't think you can teach him something you don't believe yourself. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Daniel alone in the hallway with the truth of her words echoing in his head. That night, Daniel picked Ethan up from the after-school program he'd been enrolled in since kindergarten. They drove home in silence, the space between them filled with all the conversations they'd never had. What do you want for dinner? Daniel asked, pulling into the driveway. I don't care, Ethan said, already unbuckling his seatbelt. Pizza. Sure. They went inside. Ethan disappeared upstairs to his room while Daniel stood in the kitchen, phone in hand, wondering when ordering pizza had become the extent of his parenting. His phone buzzed. Another text from Ava. Interview is at Hayes Development Corporation. Ever heard of it? Daniel's blood ran cold. Hayes Development Corporation. His company. The one with his name literally in the title. He stared at the message, mind racing through possibilities. She'd figure it out the moment she walked into the building and saw his picture in the lobby. There was no hiding this now. He started typing a response 3 different times, deleted them all. Finally. Yeah, I've heard of it. Big company, good benefits. Have you ever worked there? In a manner of speaking. What does that mean? I'll explain when I see you, after your interview. You're being mysterious. I'm being honest. Just trust me for a little while longer. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Okay. But you're buying dinner tomorrow night, and I get to ask as many questions as I want. Deal. Daniel set his phone down, leaned against the counter, and tried to remember how to breathe. Tomorrow she'd walk into his building. Tomorrow she'd see his name on everything. Tomorrow, the fragile thing they'd built would either survive the truth or shatter completely. And there was nothing he could do about it except wait. "Dad?" He turned. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway, still in his school clothes, backpack hanging from one shoulder. "Yeah, buddy? Can I ask you something?" "Of course." Ethan shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Do you miss Mom?" The question hit Daniel like a freight train. He'd spent 3 years avoiding this conversation. 3 years telling himself Ethan was too young to understand grief. 3 years using his son's silence as permission to maintain his own. Now, standing in the kitchen where Emma used to cook Sunday dinners and sing off-key to radio songs and make everything feel like home, Daniel couldn't run anymore. "Every single day," he said. Ethan's expression crumpled slightly. "Me too. Come here." For the first time in longer than Daniel could remember, he hugged his son. Really hugged him, not the awkward side embraces they'd perfected over years of emotional avoidance. Ethan held on tight, small hands gripping Daniel's shirt. "I thought I wasn't supposed to be sad anymore," Ethan said, voice muffled against Daniel's shoulder. "Everyone said it gets better." "It does get better, but that doesn't mean it stops hurting." "Is it okay to still be sad?" "Yeah, buddy, it's okay." They stood there in the kitchen, holding on to each other, and for the first time since Emma died, Daniel felt like maybe they could actually survive this, not by forgetting, not by pretending, but by finally admitting that they were both broken, and that was okay. Eventually, Ethan pulled back, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Can we still get pizza?" he asked. Daniel laughed, surprised by the sound. "Yeah, we can get pizza." They ordered, ate together at the kitchen table instead of in separate rooms, talked about school and homework and the new video game Ethan wanted but hadn't asked for because he'd learned not to ask for things. It wasn't perfect. The conversation had gaps and awkward silences and moments where neither of them knew what to say. But it was real, and that was better than the alternative they'd been living. Later, after Ethan went to bed, Daniel sat in his home office staring at his computer screen. He pulled up Ava's application file, the one Marcus had sent over that morning. Her resume was sparse. High school graduate. 2 years of college before dropping out. 5 years at the coffee shop, 3 years cleaning offices. References from both employers that praised her reliability and work ethic but revealed nothing about who she was as a person. But Daniel knew who she was. She was someone who noticed the invisible parts of life, who adapted to survive, who carried exhaustion like a second skin, but still showed up every day and did the work anyway. She was someone who'd sat across from him in an upscale restaurant and been so honestly herself that he'd forgotten to maintain the careful distance he kept between himself and the rest of the world. She was someone who deserved better than what he was doing to her right now. He picked up his phone, started typing. "Ava, there's something I need to tell you before your interview tomorrow." He stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. Tomorrow. He'd tell her everything tomorrow, face to face, and give her the chance to decide whether the truth destroyed what they'd started or proved it was strong enough to survive. His phone rang. Marcus again. "I'm calling off the interview," Marcus said without preamble. "This is too messy." "No." "Daniel, she's going to walk into the building and see your name everywhere. She's going to figure it out and feel manipulated, and we're going to lose a good candidate because you couldn't keep your personal life separate from business. She deserves the opportunity. She deserves honesty. I'm going to give her that, tomorrow, after the interview. Let her make her decision about the job without my baggage attached to it. And if she takes the position, what then? You're just going to be her boss and pretend you didn't spend 2 evenings getting emotionally involved." "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "I'm figuring this out as I go. That's not like you." "Maybe that's the problem." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then softer. "You really like her." "Yeah, I really do." "Does she like you? The real you or the version you've been showing her?" "I don't know the difference anymore." "Then maybe you should figure that out before you drag her into your mess." The call ended. Daniel sat alone in his office, surrounded by evidence of success that felt increasingly hollow, and wondered when he'd become the kind of person who lied by omission to someone who'd offered him nothing but honesty. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow would force the truth into the light, whether he was ready or not. Tonight, All he could do was hope that when Ava learned who he really was, she'd see past the money and the company and the name on the building. That she'd see Daniel, the man who'd gone to the wrong restaurant and found something he didn't know he was looking for. The man who was broken and trying and failing and trying again anyway. The man who wanted desperately to believe that mistakes could sometimes lead to the right places, even when the path there was crooked and painful and completely unexpected. He turned off his computer, went upstairs, checked on Ethan, who was asleep with a book still open on his chest. Daniel closed the book, turned off the light, stood in the doorway watching his son breathe. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, he just wanted to hold on to the possibility that change didn't always mean loss, that sometimes it meant hope. Even if that hope was built on a foundation of misunderstandings and half-truths and all the ways people hurt each other while trying not to. Even if he had no idea how to fix what he'd broken before he'd even known he was holding it. Even if the only thing he knew for certain was that seeing Ava walk away hurt more than staying alone ever had. He went to bed but didn't sleep, mind racing through scenarios and conversations, and all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. Somewhere across the city, Ava was probably doing the same thing, neither of them knowing that the interview tomorrow would be the easy part. The hard part would come after, when truth demanded its price, and they'd both have to decide whether what they'd found was worth fighting for, or just another mistake in a long line of mistakes they'd each learned to survive. Daniel closed his eyes and tried to believe in second chances, even though his track record suggested hope was just another word for eventual disappointment, even though believing felt dangerous, even though he'd spent 3 years learning that the safest way to live was not to want anything at all. But he wanted this, wanted her. Wanted the possibility that two broken people could find something whole in the spaces between their damage. And that wanting terrified him more than any business deal or financial risk ever had, because money could be replaced. This couldn't, whatever this was. Morning came too fast and not fast enough. Daniel was already at his desk by 6, going through emails he wasn't reading, reviewing reports that didn't register. The words blurred together, meaningless data that usually commanded his full attention, but today felt like background noise to the countdown running in his head. 2 o'clock. That's when Ava would walk through the doors of Hayes Development Corporation. He'd considered a dozen different strategies. Meet her in the lobby before the interview, send Marcus to handle it alone, cancel the whole thing and come clean over the phone. Each option felt worse than the last. His office door opened without a knock. Marcus walked in carrying 2 coffee cups, set one on Daniel's desk. "You look like hell," Marcus said. "Didn't sleep." "Shocking." Marcus dropped into the chair across from him. "So what's the plan? And please tell me you have one, because if you don't, I'm taking over this disaster before you make it worse." Daniel leaned back, rubbed his eyes. "Let her do the interview. Normal process. You handle it like you would any other candidate. And then? And then I talk to her. Before or after we make an offer. Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does. If you tell her before, she might walk. If you tell her after, she'll think we only offered because of whatever's happening between you two." Daniel hadn't considered that angle. Another variable in an equation that already had too many unknowns. "What would you do?" he asked. Marcus took a long drink of his coffee, studied Daniel with the kind of careful assessment that had made him valuable in negotiations. "Honestly, I'd tell her now, before she walks into this building. Give her the choice to turn around and pretend none of this happened. That's the coward's way out. No, lying by omission until she figures it out herself is the coward's way out. Giving her information and letting her decide is called respect." The words hit harder, because they were true. Daniel pulled out his phone, looked at Ava's contact. His thumb hovered over the call button. "Do it," Marcus said. "Whatever you're going to say it now before she's sitting in our conference room feeling ambushed." Daniel pressed call. It rang 4 times. He was about to hang up when she answered, breathless. "Hey, sorry, I'm running around trying to find something that looks professional enough for this interview. What's up?" Background noise filtered through. Traffic sounds, a bus announcement, the chaos of someone's morning falling apart in real time. "Ava, I need to tell you something." "Can it wait? I'm literally running to catch the bus, and if I miss this one, I'll be late, and I really can't afford to screw this up." "It's about the interview." She went quiet. The background noise faded like she'd stepped away from the street. What about it? Daniel opened his mouth. The words were right there, simple and direct. I own the company. I'm the one you'll be working for. Last night wasn't an accident. It was a test I didn't know I was part of, and now everything is complicated in ways I don't know how to fix. Instead, what came out was, just be yourself. You're going to be great. Silence on the other end. Then softer. Thanks. That actually helps. Ava, I really have to go. Bus is here. I'll text you after, okay? The line went dead. Daniel set his phone down, stared at it like it had betrayed him. Well? Marcus asked. I didn't tell her. Of course you didn't. Marcus stood, headed for the door. Interview's at 2. Conference room B. I'll handle the preliminary questions. Then you can come in if you want. Why would I come in? Because you're the CEO, and it's your company, and if we're offering her a position as your executive assistant, she should probably meet you before accepting. The logic was sound, also terrifying. I'll think about it, Daniel said. Don't think too long. She'll be here in 6 hours, and then all your thinking won't matter anymore. Marcus left. Daniel sat alone in his office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city he'd helped build, and felt more trapped than he ever had in his entire life. The morning crawled by. Daniel sat through a meeting about quarterly projections without absorbing a single number. Approved budgets he didn't review. Signed documents his assistant placed in front of him with mechanical precision. At 1:30, his phone buzzed. A text from Ava. I'm outside your building. It's huge. I feel like I'm about to interview with NASA or something. Daniel walked to his window. From the 40th floor, people on the street looked like ants, indistinguishable and small. He couldn't pick Ava out of the crowd, but knowing she was down there made his chest tight. He typed back, You'll do fine. Remember, they need you as much as you need them. I don't think that's how job interviews work. Trust me on this one. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Okay. Wish me luck. You don't need it, but good luck anyway. Daniel watched his phone for another minute, then forced himself to walk away from the window. He had work to do, reports to review, calls to make. The usual machinery of running a business that didn't stop just because his personal life was imploding. At exactly 2 o'clock, his desk phone rang. Internal line. Marcus. She's here, Marcus said. Early, actually. Been sitting in the lobby for 10 minutes looking terrified. How does she look? Like someone who borrowed clothes that don't quite fit and is trying really hard to pretend she belongs here. A pause. You should see this, Daniel. She's got potential. I know. Do you want to sit in? Every instinct screamed no. Sitting in meant facing her. Meant watching her realize who he was. Meant detonating this whole situation in the most public way possible. Give me 15 minutes, Daniel said. Start without me. I'll join partway through. Your funeral. The line went dead. Daniel stood, straightened his tie, and tried to remember how to be the version of himself that commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions without flinching. That version felt very far away right now. He waited 20 minutes instead of 15. Cowardice dressed up as strategy. Then he walked down 2 floors to the conference room, stood outside the door, and listened. Marcus's voice filtered through, professional and warm. So tell me about your experience with conflict resolution. How do you handle difficult personalities? Ava's response came quieter, nervous but steady. I work in customer service. Difficult personalities are pretty much the job description. You learn to read people fast, figure out what they actually need versus what they're saying they need. Most of the time, people just want to be heard. Can you give me an example? There's this regular at the coffee shop. Comes in every morning, orders the same thing, always finds something wrong with it. Too hot, too cold, too much foam. At first I thought he was just miserable. But then I noticed he'd only complain when the shop was empty. When it was busy, he took his coffee and left without a word. What did you do? Started asking him about his day. Turned out he was retired, lived alone, and the coffee complaint was just an excuse to have a conversation with someone. So now when he comes in, I make his coffee wrong on purpose, and we talk while I remake it. He tips better, and everyone's happier. Daniel could picture Marcus smiling at that answer. It was exactly the kind of lateral thinking they needed. That's good, Marcus said. Really good. Now, this position would involve a lot of adaptation. Long hours, unpredictable schedule, working closely with someone who doesn't always communicate clearly. How do you feel about that? Honestly, sounds like every job I've ever had. At least this one probably has health insurance. Marcus laughed. It does. Good benefits, actually, but it's demanding work. The person in this role needs to be able to anticipate needs, manage competing priorities, and occasionally tell the boss when he's being an idiot. I can do that. Even if the boss doesn't want to hear it? Especially then. In my experience, the people who need honesty most are the ones who've surrounded themselves with people too scared to give it to them. Daniel felt that comment land in his chest like a physical blow. He pushed open the conference room door. Ava sat with her back to him, across the table from Marcus. She'd worn a simple black blazer over a white blouse, both clearly borrowed or thrifted, paired with the same nervous energy she'd carried into the restaurant 3 nights ago. Marcus saw him first, expression carefully neutral. Ava, I'd like you to meet the CEO of Hayes Development Corporation. Ava turned in her chair. Their eyes met. Daniel watched the recognition hit her in stages. First confusion, why is Daniel here? Then dawning understanding as her gaze flicked to the nameplate on the door behind him, then back to his face. Hayes Development Corporation. Daniel Hayes. The color drained from her face. Hello, Ava, Daniel said, keeping his voice level even though his heart was trying to break through his ribcage. It's good to see you again. She stood so fast her chair rolled backward. The word came out strangled. I can explain. You're the CEO. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered with the flatness of someone whose brain was still processing betrayal. This whole time, I didn't know about the interview setup when we met, Daniel said quickly. That first night was a genuine accident. I went to the wrong restaurant. You thought I was your date, and I didn't correct you because you thought it was funny? Ava's voice rose slightly. Because you wanted to see how long you could keep the broke girl thinking she had a chance with someone important? No. Because you were real, and I hadn't talked to anyone real in years, and I was selfish enough to want that for one night. Marcus stood, sensing the conversation spiraling. Maybe I should give you two some privacy. No. Ava held up a hand. No, stay. Because I want to witness when I tell your boss exactly what I think about companies that test people without their knowledge and CEOs who lie about who they are for fun. It wasn't for fun, Daniel said. Then what was it for? She grabbed her borrowed blazer from the back of the chair. You know what? It doesn't matter. This whole thing was a mistake from the beginning, and I should have trusted my instincts when they told me people like you don't sit in restaurants with people like me unless there's an angle. There's no angle. Really? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a pretty elaborate setup. Test the poor girl, see if she can handle herself, dangle a job in front of her while pretending to be interested in her as a person. Her hands shook as she slung her purse over her shoulder. I've had enough people use me. I don't need to add billionaire CEOs to the list. Ava, please, don't. She moved toward the door, had to walk past Daniel to get there. Up close, he could see unshed tears making her eyes bright. Just don't. You had multiple chances to tell me the truth. Yesterday at coffee, last night over text, this morning on the phone, and you chose to let me walk in here blind instead. I was trying to protect you. She laughed, bitter and sharp. From what? Information? Choice? The chance to decide for myself whether I wanted anything to do with this before I showed up to a job interview with someone I thought was just a guy I'd met by accident. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. She reached the door, paused with her hand on the handle. For what it's worth, you would have been a good boss. You read people well, you asked the right questions, and you clearly know how to make people feel valued right up until the moment you don't. She left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the silence that followed. Daniel stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to go after her, to explain, to fix this before it became irreparable. Marcus spoke first. Well, that went worse than I expected. I need to talk to her. What you need to do is give her space. Marcus sat back down, looking tired. She's right, Daniel. You had chances to come clean and you didn't take them. Chasing her now just makes you look desperate. I am desperate. Then be desperate from a distance and let her process. Marcus pulled out his phone, typed something. I'm sending her the formal rejection. Clean break. She can move on and you can figure out why you're willing to torpedo a good hire for a relationship that started on false pretenses. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Don't contact me. I mean it. He stared at the message, then at Marcus. What do I do? Honestly? I don't know. This isn't a business problem I can solve with strategy. Marcus stood, gathered his notes. But I'll tell you what Emma would have said. The mention of his late wife made Daniel flinch. Marcus continued anyway. She would have told you that being scared doesn't excuse being dishonest. That if you actually cared about this girl, you would have respected her enough to give her the truth, even when it was hard. And that hiding behind excuses about protection and timing is just another way of saying you chose your comfort over her agency. Emma would have been nicer about it. Emma would have been disappointed in you. There's a difference. Marcus headed for the door. Take the rest of the day. Go home. Figure out who you want to be, because the guy I just watched let that girl walk out isn't someone I recognize. Daniel left the building through the parking garage to avoid seeing anyone. He drove home on autopilot, mind replaying the look on Ava's face when she'd realized who he was. Not just surprise, betrayal. The specific kind of hurt that came from trusting someone who hadn't earned it. He'd done that. Put that look on her face. Chosen his own comfort over her right to know what she was walking into. The house was empty when he got there. Ethan wouldn't be home for hours. Just Daniel and 40 rooms of carefully maintained emptiness. He went to his office, pulled out the bottom drawer of his desk where he kept things he didn't want to look at but couldn't throw away. Photo albums, birthday cards, a jewelry box containing Emma's wedding ring, and at the very bottom, a sealed envelope with his name on it in Emma's handwriting. She'd written it 2 weeks before she died, though neither of them had known her time was that short. Some estate planning exercise their lawyer had recommended, letters to loved ones in case of emergency. Emma had taken it seriously. Daniel had written 3 sentences and called it done. He'd never opened her letter. Couldn't bring himself to read her last words when reading them would make her death feel more permanent. But sitting in his office, fresh off destroying something good before it had a chance to become real, Daniel broke the seal. The paper was cream-colored, expensive. Emma had used the fountain pen he'd bought her for their anniversary. Her handwriting looped and curved, familiar as breathing. Daniel, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong and I'm not there to tell you this in person. I hate that. I hate the idea of you going through something hard without me beside you. But since I can't be there, I'm trusting these words to do what I can't. Don't stop living. I know you. I know how you think. You're probably already building walls, telling yourself that the safest way forward is alone, that caring about people just means more opportunities to lose them. You're probably working yourself into the ground and calling it purpose. You're probably forgetting how to feel anything except productive. Stop it. Whatever happened to me doesn't mean you're done. It means you have to keep going, and going alone isn't the same as going forward. You have to let people in. You have to let yourself want things. You have to remember that life isn't something you control. It's something you experience. I'm not saying replace me. I'm saying honor what we had by staying open to what could come next. Love isn't a finite resource. You don't run out just because you've already given it to someone. It grows. It expands. It finds new shapes and forms and ways to exist. If you meet someone who makes you feel alive again, don't sabotage it out of guilt. Don't tell yourself you're being disloyal to my memory. The most loyal thing you can do is live the fullest life possible, because that's what I wanted for you. Not preservation. Evolution. Take care of our son. Teach him it's okay to hurt. Teach him feelings aren't weaknesses. Teach him all the things you're bad at so he doesn't grow up to be you. Brilliant and capable and so locked down emotionally that he forgets how to connect. I love you. I will always love you. And that love doesn't come with conditions about what you do after I'm gone. It just wants you to be happy. Choose happiness, Daniel, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. Yours always, Emma. Daniel read it twice, then a third time. Tears he hadn't let himself cry in 3 years finally spilling over because Emma had known, had seen exactly who he would become in grief and tried to give him permission to be something else. He'd ignored that permission, built exactly the walls she'd predicted, turned into exactly the man she'd warned against. And when something real had finally broken through those walls, he'd sabotaged it with the same control issues and emotional cowardice she'd spent their marriage trying to soften. His phone sat on the desk, Ava's last message still displayed. Don't contact me. Emma's letter lay beside it, ink slightly smudged from his tears. Choose happiness. Daniel picked up his phone, put it back down, picked it up again. Ava had asked him not to contact her. Respecting that meant giving her space, but it also meant accepting that he might have destroyed this beyond repair, that some mistakes didn't get second chances no matter how sorry you were. He compromised. Sent one message, knowing she might not read it, might delete it immediately, might block his number. You're right. I had chances to tell you, and I didn't take them because I was scared of losing something I didn't even have yet. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. You deserved honesty, and I gave you strategy instead. I'm sorry. If you never want to hear from me again, I understand, but you should know that meeting you was the first time in 3 years I remembered what it felt like to want something more than just getting through the day. You made me want to be better. I'm sorry I wasn't better when it mattered. He sent it before he could second-guess the words. Then he put his phone face down on the desk and tried to figure out how to sit with the possibility that some things, once broken, stayed broken. The afternoon dragged into evening. Daniel sat in his office, Emma's letter in front of him, and forced himself to actually feel what he'd been avoiding for 3 years. The grief, the loneliness. The fear that letting someone in meant opening himself up to the same devastating loss he'd experienced when Emma died. But also the hope, the small, stubborn spark that had flickered to life when Ava sat across from him in that restaurant and talked about being invisible like it was just another fact of life. He'd felt that spark and immediately started planning how to protect it, control it, manage it into something safe and predictable. And in doing so, he'd smothered it. His phone buzzed. Daniel grabbed it so fast he nearly dropped it. Not Ava, Ethan's school. He answered, Is everything okay? Mister? Hayes, this is Principal Morrison. Ethan's fine, but we had a small incident on the playground today. He got into an altercation with another student. Daniel's attention sharpened. What kind of altercation? Nothing physical, but there was some yelling and Ethan became very upset. We have him in my office now. He's asking for you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He made it in 15. Principal Morrison met him at the front desk, expression professionally sympathetic. He's in my office. Won't really talk about what happened, but he's been crying for the past hour. Daniel's chest tightened. What started it? Another student made a comment about his mother, something insensitive. Ethan didn't handle it well. Of course he didn't. How could he, when his father had spent 3 years teaching him that the proper response to grief was silence? Daniel walked into the principal's office. Ethan sat in an oversized chair, knees pulled to his chest, eyes red and swollen. Hey, buddy, Daniel said softly. Ethan looked up, relief and residual anger warring on his face. He said Mom was watching me from heaven and that she'd be disappointed I was sad all the time. The words hit Daniel like a punch. Who said that? Mason, from my class. He said his mom told him people in heaven don't like it when you're sad, because it means you don't trust them to be happy up there. And I told him that was stupid, and then I yelled, and Ms. Peterson sent me here. Daniel sat down in the chair next to his son. What Mason said was wrong. But what if he's right? Ethan's voice cracked. What if she's watching and she sees me being sad and she thinks I don't want her to be happy? Ethan, look at me. His son turned, tears streaming down his face. Your mom loved you more than anything in the world, Daniel said. And wherever she is now, whatever form that takes, I promise you, she's not disappointed in you for missing her. She's not mad that you're sad. She'd probably be more upset if you weren't, because that would mean you didn't care. I care so much it hurts. I know, me too. Ethan wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Do you still cry about her? Daniel had spent 3 years presenting strength to his son. 3 years modeling emotional control as if it were something to aspire to rather than a survival mechanism that had stopped serving its purpose. Yeah, he admitted. I cried today, actually. Why? Because I read a letter she wrote me before she died, and it reminded me of all the ways I've been screwing up since she's been gone. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. Adults didn't usually admit to screwing up. What did the letter say? That she wanted me to keep living, to stop being so scared of feeling things, to teach you that it's okay to hurt and to be sad and to miss people. You're not good at that stuff. No, Daniel agreed. I'm really not, but I'm trying to get better. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ethan asked, Did you mess something up today? Is that why you're home early? Yeah, I messed up something important with someone who deserved better. Can you fix it? I don't know, maybe. Or maybe I broke it too badly and all I can do is learn from it and try not to make the same mistake again. Ethan considered this with the gravity of someone who'd spent too much time alone with complicated thoughts. Mom used to say that sorry only works if you mean it, and if you do something different after. She was right. Are you going to do something different? Daniel looked at his son, 7 years old and already carrying weight no child should have to carry, and made a decision. Yeah, buddy, I am, starting right now. They left the school together. Daniel called Marcus from the car. I'm taking tomorrow off, Daniel said when Marcus answered. Maybe the rest of the week. Everything okay? No, but it will be. Can you handle things without me for a few days? Daniel, I've been handling things without you for 3 years. You just never noticed because you were too busy pretending to be present while actually being a ghost. The assessment was harsh, also accurate. Fair enough, Daniel said. I'll check in, but I need some time. Take it. About time you started acting like a human being again. Daniel ended the call, glanced at Ethan in the passenger seat. What do you want for dinner? Can we cook something? Like actually cook instead of ordering? I don't really know how to cook. Mom's recipe book is still in the kitchen. We could try. The idea of opening Emma's recipe book, with her handwritten notes and grease stains and the history of 1,000 family dinners, should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt right. Okay, Daniel said. Let's do that. They went home, pulled out the recipe book, decided on spaghetti and meatballs because it seemed hard to mess up too badly. They messed it up anyway. The sauce was too thick, the pasta overdone, the meatballs somehow both burnt on the outside and undercooked in the middle. It was the best meal they'd had together in 3 years. After dinner, after Ethan went to bed, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with Emma's letter in front of him and his phone in his hand. No response from Ava. He hadn't really expected one, but sitting there, in the kitchen where Emma used to make everything feel warm and possible, Daniel felt something shift. He couldn't control whether Ava forgave him, couldn't guarantee this would work out, couldn't promise that choosing to be vulnerable wouldn't result in exactly the kind of pain he'd been avoiding. But he could choose to try, could choose to be honest even when it was hard, could choose to show up as a complete person instead of a carefully constructed facade. Could choose happiness, even when it was scary. Especially when it was scary. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Ava's mother. She told me what happened. I don't know what you did exactly, but my daughter doesn't cry like that over nothing. If you care about her at all, you'll give her time. And if you don't care about her, you'll leave her alone permanently. She's been hurt enough by people who saw her as convenient rather than valuable. Don't add yourself to that list unless you're willing to prove you're different. Daniel stared at the message, then typed back, I'm different, and I'm willing to prove it, but only if she wants me to. I won't push. I'll wait, however long it takes. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Good, because my daughter deserves someone who chooses her when it's inconvenient, not just when it's easy. She does. And I'm sorry I didn't do that from the beginning. Sorry doesn't mean much without action. I know. I'm working on the action part. The dots disappeared and didn't come back. Daniel set his phone down, looked at Emma's letter one more time. Choose happiness. He was trying, even though it hurt, even though he'd already failed once, even though there were no guarantees and the ending was completely out of his control. He was trying. And for tonight, in this kitchen full of ghosts and possibilities, that felt like enough. 3 days passed with no word from Ava. Daniel kept his promise. No calls, no texts, no showing up at the coffee shop where she worked, even though he drove past it twice and had to physically stop himself from pulling over. He spent the time with Ethan instead, picked him up from school every day, helped with homework at the kitchen table instead of disappearing into his office, attempted more recipes from Emma's book with varying degrees of failure that somehow made the successes feel more earned. On the 4th morning, Ethan asked, Are you going back to work today? Daniel looked up from the pancakes he was attempting. Probably. Why? You've been home a lot. It's weird. Ethan poked at his orange juice. Good weird, but weird. I've been taking some time to figure things out. Did you figure them out? Daniel flipped a pancake that was definitely burnt on one side. Some of them. Others are still in progress. Like the thing with the person you messed up with? Yeah, like that. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, Mom used to say that when you hurt someone, you can't make them forgive you. You just have to give them space and show them you learned something. Daniel slid the pancakes onto a plate, sat down across from his son. She said that to you? No, to you. I heard her say it once when you came home late from work and missed her birthday dinner. You guys were in the kitchen and I was supposed to be asleep, but I came down for water. The memory surfaced, hazy but present. Emma standing at the sink, Daniel making excuses about meetings and traffic and things that couldn't wait. Her voice calm but tired, telling him that sorry didn't mean much if the pattern never changed. He'd apologized again. Promised to do better. Then done the exact same thing the following month. Your mom was a smart woman, Daniel said. She was mad at you a lot. Yeah, she was. I gave her plenty of reasons. But she still loved you. She did, even when I didn't deserve it. Ethan picked up his fork, examined the pancake. This one's burnt. I know. You want me to make another? No, it's okay. Burnt food tastes better when you make it yourself instead of ordering it. Daniel smiled despite everything. That's a very diplomatic way of saying I'm a terrible cook. You're getting better. Ethan took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. Do you love the person you messed up with? The question landed like a grenade in the middle of the kitchen. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, tried to find an answer that was honest without being too complicated for a 7-year-old to process. I don't know if it's love yet, he said finally, but it could be, if I don't screw it up worse than I already have. Would she be around? Like, would I meet her? Maybe, if she gives me another chance, but that's a big if. Ethan went back to his pancakes, processing this in the way kids did, filing it away for later examination. Okay, just let me know before you bring someone home. I don't like surprises. Deal. Daniel drove Ethan to school, then sat in the parking lot afterwards staring at his phone. Still nothing from Ava. Her mother hadn't texted again either. He pulled up Marcus's contact, called. You coming in today? Marcus asked by way of greeting. Yeah, give me an hour. Take your time. We're not falling apart without you. Turns out when you hire competent people and trust them to do their jobs, things run pretty smoothly. Point taken. Good, because I've got 3 candidates lined up for the assistant position, all solid. None of them come with personal baggage. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. You're still hiring for that. You still need an assistant, unless you want to keep doing everything yourself and burning out before you hit 40. What about Ava? Marcus sighed. What about her? She made it clear she wants nothing to do with us. We move on. That's how this works. I don't want to move on. Then I don't know what to tell you. You can't force someone to forgive you just because you've decided you're sorry. The words echoed what Ethan had said. What Emma's letter had implied, what Daniel already knew but didn't want to accept. Set up the interviews, Daniel said. I'll look at the candidates. You sure? No, but do it anyway. He ended the call, sat in the school parking lot watching other parents drop off their kids. Normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems that probably didn't include sabotaging potential relationships through elaborate lies of omission. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Ava. Before you get excited, I'm not texting to forgive you. I'm texting because my mom won't stop talking about how I should at least hear you out. And apparently she gave you her number, which is a whole separate violation we'll be discussing later. Daniel's heart rate spiked. He typed back carefully. I'm listening. Whatever you want to say, I'm listening. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I don't want to say anything over text. Can you meet me somewhere? Neutral ground, not your office, not my coffee shop. Somewhere we can talk without one of us having home field advantage. Name the place. The park. The one from the first night. There's a bench near the fountain. 1 hour. I'll be there. Daniel sat motionless for a full minute, trying to process what had just happened. Then he put the car in drive and headed home to change into something less corporate. If this was going to be a conversation about honesty, he should at least look like a person instead of a CEO. He arrived at the park 20 minutes early and immediately regretted it. 20 minutes of sitting on a bench spiraling through every possible version of how this conversation could go. 20 minutes of watching people walk dogs and jog and live their lives while his entire future hung in the balance of whatever Ava was about to say. She appeared exactly on time, walking down the path from the opposite direction. She'd come straight from work. He could tell by the coffee shop apron she'd shoved into her bag and the faint smell of espresso that clung to her clothes. Ava sat down on the opposite end of the bench. Not close. Definitely not touching. "Thanks for coming," Daniel said. "My mom can be very persistent when she wants to be." "Seems to run in the family." Ava didn't smile. "Don't do that. Don't try to charm your way through this." "You're right. Sorry." They sat in silence. The fountain ran. A kid on a scooter went past. The world kept moving despite the fact that Daniels was currently suspended in amber. "I've been angry for 4 days," Ava said finally. "Really angry. The kind of angry where you replay every conversation trying to figure out where you missed the signs that someone was lying to you." "I wasn't lying. You were lying by omission, which is worse because it means you knew exactly what you were doing." She turned to look at him for the first time. "I told you things that first night. Real things. About my life, my struggles, my dad dying. And the whole time you sat there knowing you could solve every financial problem I have with what you probably spend on dry cleaning. That's not why I didn't tell you." "Then why?" Daniel took a breath. "Because when you sat down at that table, you looked at me like I was just a person. Not a CEO, not a billionaire, not a widow. Everyone tiptoes around because they don't know what to say. Just Daniel. And I haven't been just Daniel in so long I forgot what it felt like. So you lied. So I was selfish. I wanted one night where someone saw me instead of what I represent. And then one night turned into coffee, and coffee turned into texts. And by the time I realized how deep I was, telling you felt like it would destroy everything." Ava shook her head. "You don't get it. It's not about the money. I don't care that you're rich." "Then what is it about?" "It's about choice." Her voice rose slightly. "You knew who I was from the moment Marcus set up that fake date. You had all the information. I had none. And you kept it that way because it gave you control. You got to decide when to tell me, how to tell me, whether to tell me at all. I didn't get to decide anything." The accusation hit home because it was true. He'd controlled the narrative the entire time, telling himself it was protection when really it was just another form of manipulation. "You're right," Daniel said. I took your choice away. And I'm sorry." "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for the chance to prove I learned something." Ava studied him, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. "What did you learn?" "That control is just fear dressed up as strategy, that honesty matters more than comfort, that you deserved better than what I gave you, and if I ever get another chance, I'll do better." "That's a nice speech." "It's the truth. Truth would have been telling me who you were before I walked into that interview." "I know. Truth would have been calling me the morning of and giving me the choice to turn around." "I know. So why didn't you?" Daniel met her eyes. "Because I was terrified of losing something I'd just found. Because I'd spent 3 years building walls and you walked through them like they were made of paper. Because my wife died, and I stopped believing in second chances, and then you showed up and made me want to believe again. And that scared me more than anything I've ever built or lost or survived." Ava went very still. "Your wife died?" 3 years ago. Car accident. I have a son, Ethan. He's 7. We've both been kind of frozen since it happened, going through motions. Existing, but not really living." Daniel rubbed his face. "And then I met you and something woke up, and I didn't know what to do with that except try to control it so it couldn't hurt me." "You should have told me that." "I know. Not now, then, when it might have actually meant something instead of feeling like a last-ditch excuse." "You're right." Ava stood, paced to the fountain, stood with her back to him. "My mom told me I should give you another chance. Said everyone makes mistakes, and what matters is whether they learn from them. What do you think?" "I think I want to believe you, but I also think wanting something doesn't make it smart." She turned around. "I've spent my whole life being the person who adapts, who makes herself smaller so other people can be comfortable, who takes whatever scraps get offered because scraps are better than nothing. And I'm tired of it. You shouldn't have to be small for anyone. No, I shouldn't, but I have been. And meeting you, thinking you saw me as an equal, it felt different. It felt like maybe I didn't have to shrink anymore. And then finding out it was all built on you knowing everything while I knew nothing. She shook her head. It felt like the same pattern all over again. Me being convenient, me being managed. That's not what you were. Then what was I? Daniel stood, moved closer, but didn't touch. You were the first person in 3 years who made me want to be better than I was. Who listened when I talked and asked questions like my answers mattered. Who sat in an expensive restaurant and ate bread like it was a gift instead of an expectation. His voice roughened. You were real, Ava, and I screwed it up because I was more comfortable with control than honesty. And now? Now I'm trying to be better. Not because I think it'll fix this. Because you were right. I needed to learn something. And sitting with my son making burnt pancakes while he tells me his mom used to say sorry doesn't mean anything without change. Daniel exhaled. That hit different than any business lesson I've ever learned. Ava's expression softened fractionally. You made pancakes? Terrible ones. But we made them together, which apparently matters more than whether they're edible. Your son told you that? 7-year-olds are apparently very wise when adults actually listen to them. A small smile tugged at Ava's mouth. What's his name again? Ethan. What's he like? Quiet. Too quiet. We've both been living like ghosts in the same house, avoiding anything that might feel too much. Daniel sat back down on the bench. Your mom asked if I was willing to prove I was different, and I am. But not to win you back. To be someone my son can actually talk to stop hiding behind work and control, and all the things I convinced myself were keeping me safe when really they were just keeping me numb. Ava walked back to the bench, sat down. Not close, but closer than before. I don't know if I can trust you again, she said quietly. I know. And I'm definitely not going to work for your company. That ship has sailed. Understood. But she paused, seemed to be wrestling with something. But I also don't want to walk away without at least seeing if there's something real here. Not the version built on misunderstandings, the actual thing, whatever that is. Daniel's chest tightened with something that felt dangerously close to hope. What does that look like? I don't know. We start over maybe? Like, actually start over. No secrets. No games. Just 2 people getting to know each other honestly. I'd like that. I have conditions. Okay. You don't get to protect me from information. If there's something I should know, you tell me, even if it's uncomfortable. Agreed. And you don't get to use money to solve problems without asking me first. I'm broke, not broken. There's a difference. Fair. And if this, she gestured between them. If whatever this is gets serious, I meet your son when he's ready, not when you decide it's convenient. Kids aren't props, they're people. I know, and yes, all of that. Yes, Ava exhaled slowly. Okay then. Okay? Okay, we can try. But Daniel? She waited until he met her eyes. I meant what I said. I'm tired of being small. If you need me to shrink to fit into your life, this won't work. I need to be myself. Messy and broke and opinionated. If that's not what you want, tell me now. That's exactly what I want, Daniel said. You exactly as you are. I don't want you to change anything. People always say that. I'm not people. No, Ava agreed, something complicated crossing her face. You're really not. They sat in silence, watching the fountain. After a while, Ava said, Tell me about her. Your wife. Daniel stiffened instinctively, then forced himself to relax. This was the honesty part, the part where he stopped hiding. Her name was Emma. We met in college. She was studying architecture. I was doing business. Everyone said we were too different, but she just laughed and said different was the whole point. He smiled despite the ache in his chest. She was loud where I was quiet, impulsive where I was careful. She made me better by being herself. How did she die? Car accident, rainy night, someone ran a red light. The words came easier than they used to. One minute she was alive, the next she wasn't. And I spent 3 years telling myself the lesson was not to care that much because caring that much meant it could hurt that much. That's a terrible lesson. Yeah, took me a while to figure that out. Ava reached over tentatively and touched his hand, just her fingers over his. Not quite holding, but contact. I'm sorry you lost her, she said. Me too. Do you think she'd be okay with this? With you moving on? Daniel thought about Emma's letter. Choose happiness, even when it's scary. Yeah, he said. I think she'd be pushing me toward it faster than I'm comfortable with. She sounds like she was good for you. She was, but she's gone. And I'm still here. And I'm trying to figure out how to honor what we had while still being open to what could come next. Ava was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I watched my dad die slowly. Cancer. Took 2 years. By the end, he couldn't remember my name half the time. Her voice went soft. And the thing nobody tells you about grief is that it doesn't end. It just changes shape. Some days it's background noise. Other days it's the only thing you can hear. Yeah, but you keep going anyway, because the alternative is worse. Yeah. She squeezed his hand. We're kind of a mess, aren't we? Little bit. Think that makes us compatible or doomed? Depends on whether we're willing to be honest about the mess instead of pretending we've got it together. Ava smiled, real and tired and somehow hopeful. Then I guess we'll find out. They stayed at the park until the sun started to set, talking about everything they hadn't talked about before. Real things. Hard things. The kind of conversation that built foundation instead of fantasy. When Ava finally checked her phone and swore about missing her bus, Daniel offered her a ride. I can take the next one, she said. I know you can. I'm offering anyway. No strings. Just a ride. She considered, then nodded. Okay. But you're not coming up to my apartment. We're starting slow, remember? Slow. Got it. They walked to his car. Ava stopped when she saw it, raised an eyebrow. This is what you drive? Sometimes. I have others. Of course you do. But she was smiling when she said it. The drive took 20 minutes. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt different than it had before. Less weighted, more natural. When they pulled up to her building, Ava unbuckled but didn't get out immediately. Thank you, she said, for being honest today. Finally. Thank you for giving me the chance to be. Don't make me regret it. I'll do my best. She opened the door, paused. Can I ask you something? Anything. That first night at the restaurant, when I sat down and you realized I wasn't who you were waiting for, what made you decide to stay? Daniel thought back. Ava looking exhausted and nervous, the way she'd talked with her hands, the honesty in every word. You asked me if I was your blind date, he said. And for half a second, I thought about correcting you. But then you smiled like you were relieved to find someone, anyone, waiting for you. And I realized I'd been waiting too. Just didn't know for what until you sat down. Ava's eyes went bright. That's either the sweetest thing anyone's ever said to me or the best line I've ever heard. Can it be both? Maybe. She climbed out of the car, leaned back in. I work tomorrow morning, 6 to noon. If you want to stop by after your fancy CEO meetings, I make a decent latte. I'll be there. Don't be late. Wouldn't dream of it. She closed the door, started toward her building, then turned back one more time. Hey, Daniel? Yeah? I'm glad you went to the wrong restaurant. Me too. He waited until she disappeared inside, then drove home with something that felt dangerously like hope burning in his chest. Ethan was already home when Daniel walked in, being watched by the nanny they employed for after-school coverage. How was your day? Daniel asked. Fine. Did you fix it? Fix what? The thing with the person you messed up with. Daniel hung his keys by the door. We're working on it. It's going to take time. But you're trying? Yeah, buddy. I'm trying. Good. Ethan went back to his homework. Mom would be happy about that. The casual mention of Emma, delivered without pain or hesitation, hit Daniel harder than expected. You think so? Yeah, she always said you were too serious. That you needed someone to remind you how to have fun. Ethan looked up from his math worksheet. Is this person fun? Daniel thought about Ava nervously rambling in the restaurant, her brutal honesty at the coffee shop, The way she'd called him out without apology in the conference room. "Yeah?" he said. "She's fun. Different kind of fun than your mom was, but yeah. Okay, just let me know if she's coming over. I don't like surprises, remember?" I remember. That night, after Ethan went to bed, Daniel sat in his office with Emma's letter in front of him again. He'd read it so many times in the past 4 days that he'd memorized most of it, but his eyes kept going back to one line. Choose happiness, Daniel, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. He pulled out his phone, sent a text to Ava. "Thank you for today, for giving me another chance when you had every reason not to." Her response came a few minutes later. "Don't thank me yet. I'm still deciding if this is brave or stupid. Can it be both?" "Maybe. We'll see." "Fair enough. Good night, Ava. Good night, Daniel. And hey, yeah, tomorrow when you come to the coffee shop, come as yourself. Not the CEO, just the guy who makes terrible pancakes and is trying to be better. That I can do." Daniel set his phone down, looked at Emma's letter one more time, then carefully folded it and put it back in the envelope. He wasn't choosing to forget her, wasn't replacing what they'd had. He was choosing to keep living, to stay open, to risk the pain of loss because the alternative was a half-life of careful distance and controlled emotion. Emma had asked him to do that. Ava needed him to do that. Ethan deserved a father who did that. But more than any of them, Daniel needed to do it for himself. Because 3 years of being numb had taught him exactly one thing. Safety wasn't the same as living, and he was tired of just surviving. He wanted to feel again, wanted to risk again, wanted to build something new on the foundation of everything he'd lost. Not because it was safe, because it was real. And real, he was learning, was worth fighting for, even when it was messy, even when it was scary, even when every instinct told him to retreat behind walls that had kept him protected but alone. Emma had been right. Love wasn't finite. It didn't run out. It just changed shape, found new forms, created new possibilities. And Daniel was finally ready to let it. Whatever came next, whether this thing with Ava survived or crumbled, whether he figured out how to be a better father or kept stumbling through parenthood, making mistakes and learning from them, whether he learned to balance work and life or kept struggling with the same patterns that had defined him for years, at least he'd be trying. At least he'd be present. At least he'd be alive in all the ways that mattered. That was Emma's gift to him. Not the letter, though that had helped, but the years they'd spent together when she'd refused to let him hide, pushed him to feel, demanded he show up fully even when it was uncomfortable. She'd taught him how to be human. He'd just forgotten the lessons after she died. Now, sitting in his office in a house that was slowly starting to feel less empty, Daniel remembered, and remembering hurt. But it also felt like coming home. Daniel showed up in the coffee shop at 12:15 the next day, deliberately late enough that the lunch rush would be over, but early enough to catch Ava before she left. He'd changed out of his suit into jeans and a sweater that Ethan had informed him looked normal, not rich, which he assumed was a compliment. The goal was to look like just Daniel, not the CEO, not the billionaire, just the guy who made terrible pancakes and was trying to figure out how to be honest. The shop was smaller than he'd expected, tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookstore that looked like it was barely hanging on. The kind of neighborhood business that survived on regulars and stubbornness rather than profit margins. Ava was behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine with the focused efficiency of someone who'd done the same motion 1,000 times. She looked up when the door chimed, and something in her expression shifted when she saw him. Not quite a smile, not quite relief, something in between. "You came," she said. "I said I would." People say a lot of things. I'm working on being someone who means them. She set down her cleaning rag, glanced at the clock. "My shift just ended. Give me 5 minutes to clock out?" "Take your time." Daniel sat at a small table near the window while Ava disappeared into the back. The shop was exactly what he'd pictured. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, a chalkboard menu with handwritten specials. It felt lived in. Real. The opposite of the sterile corporate spaces he spent most of his time in. A woman emerged from the back, older, with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, and the kind of face that suggested she'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. "You're him," she said. Not a question. Daniel stood. "I'm Daniel. I'm Ruth. I own this place." She crossed her arms. Ava's a good kid, works hard, never complains, shows up even when she's sick because she can't afford to miss a shift. If you're here to mess with her, you can leave now and save everyone the trouble. I'm not here to mess with her. That's what they all say. Ruth studied him with the kind of assessment that probably made bad employees quit on the spot. But you already hurt her once, didn't you? She came in yesterday with eyes so red I thought she had an infection. Worked a whole shift and didn't say a word about it. That's the kind of person she is. Swallows her pain so nobody else has to deal with it. The words landed like accusations. Deserved ones. I know, Daniel said, and I'm trying to do better. Trying isn't the same as doing. No, it's not. But it's all I've got right now. Ruth's expression didn't soften, but she nodded once. She's in the back getting her stuff, and for what it's worth, I told her she was crazy to give you another chance, but she said something about everyone deserving a second chance if they're willing to earn it. She leaned in slightly. Don't make her regret that. She's had enough regrets for one lifetime. I'll do my best. Your best better be damn good. Ruth walked away just as Ava emerged from the back, bag over her shoulder, wearing the same tired jeans and sweater from yesterday. Ruth give you the speech? Ava asked. Something like that. She means well. She's protective. You're lucky to have people who care about you like that. Ava pulled her jacket tighter. Yeah, I am. So where are we going? I thought we could walk, if that's okay, just talk. No expensive restaurants? No fancy plans? Just walking, I promise. They left the coffee shop and headed toward the park, the same one they'd sat in yesterday. The November air had a bite to it, winter making promises it would keep soon enough. How was your shift? Daniel asked. Long. We had a rush around 10 that didn't let up until 11:30. Broken espresso machine, angry customers, the usual chaos. She shoved her hands in her pockets. But I made decent tips, so I'm not complaining. You always this optimistic about terrible days? Not optimistic, just realistic. Complaining doesn't change anything, so you might as well find something good in it. They walked in silence for a block. Then Ava said, Can I ask you something? Anything. Yesterday you mentioned your son, Ethan. What's he like? Really like, not the version you tell people at fancy parties. Daniel thought about how to answer that honestly. He's quiet. Too quiet for a 7-year-old. He's smart, gets good grades, never causes trouble. And that scares me more than if he was acting out. Why? Because I know what that quietness means. It means he's learned not to need anything, not to ask for things, not to take up space. Daniel kicked at a loose stone on the sidewalk. I did that to him, modeled that behavior for 3 years until it became his default. You're recognizing it now, though. That counts for something. Does it? Because recognizing you screwed up doesn't undo the damage. Ava was quiet for a moment. Then she said, My dad got sick when I was 23. I dropped out of college to help with bills, figured I'd go back after he got better. But he didn't get better. He got worse. And by the time he died, I was so far behind I couldn't catch up. She looked at Daniel. I spent years being angry at him for getting sick, for ruining my plans, for leaving me with debt and no degree and no future. And you know what the terrible part is? What? I never told him. Never said I was angry or hurt or scared. Just smiled and said everything was fine while I fell apart inside. And now he's gone and I can't take it back. Can't tell him the truth. Can't have the conversation I should have had when it mattered. I'm sorry. My point is, you still have time with your son. You can still change the pattern. It's not too late. She stopped walking, turned to face him. But you have to actually do it. Not just recognize it. Not just feel guilty about it. Actually change. I know. Do you, though? Because from where I'm standing, you're really good at seeing problems and really bad at fixing them. The observation stung because it was accurate. You're right, Daniel admitted. I spend my whole life identifying issues and delegating solutions. But you can't delegate parenting, or relationships, or being honest with the people you care about. No, you can't. They started walking again. After a while, Daniel asked, What would you do if you were me? You really want my opinion? I wouldn't ask if I didn't. Ava considered. I'd start small, not some grand gesture or complete life overhaul, just small things that show you're paying attention. Ask your son about his day and actually listen to the answer. Have dinner together without phones or distractions. Let him see you be human instead of perfect. I'm far from perfect. Then show him that. Kids need to see adults struggle and keep trying. It teaches them that failure isn't the end of the world. Daniel thought about the burnt pancakes, the awkward conversations, the way Ethan had started talking more in the past week than he had in the past year. I'm trying, he said. It's messy and uncomfortable, and I keep screwing it up, but I'm trying. That's all anyone can ask. They reached the park, sat on the same bench as yesterday. The fountain ran despite the cold, water catching afternoon light. Can I ask you something now? Daniel said. Fair is fair. Why did you give me another chance? After everything, after I lied and manipulated the situation and basically proved I'm exactly the kind of person you should avoid. Why not just walk away? Ava was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. Because I've spent my whole life being safe, taking the path that made sense, not risking anything because I couldn't afford to fail. And where did that get me? 30 years old, working 2 jobs, living paycheck to paycheck with nothing to show for it, except a lot of regrets about things I didn't try. This doesn't feel safe. No, it doesn't. It feels terrifying, actually. But it also feels real. And I'm tired of safe. If safe means I keep living the same year over and over until I die, having never actually taken a risk on something that mattered. Daniel reached over, took her hand. She let him. I don't want to be another regret, he said. Then don't be. Show up. Be honest. Let me see the messy parts instead of just the parts you think I want to see. What if the messy parts are worse than you think? Then we'll deal with it together. That's kind of how this works. They sat holding hands, watching people pass by. A couple arguing about directions. A teenager on a skateboard. An old man feeding pigeons despite the sign that said, not to. Normal life happening all around them while they figured out whether they could build something real from the wreckage of how they'd started. After a while, Ava said, I should probably get home. I have my evening shift in 3 hours. I'll drive you. Daniel, I know, you can take the bus. But I'm offering anyway. No expectations. Just a ride. She smiled. You're going to keep doing that, aren't you? Offering things even when I say I don't need them. Probably. Is that annoying? Little bit, but also kind of sweet. They walked back to where Daniel had parked. The drive to Ava's apartment took 20 minutes, the same route as yesterday, but somehow different, less weighted, more natural. When they arrived, Ava unbuckled but didn't immediately get out. Thank you, she said, for showing up as yourself today. Not the CEO version, just Daniel. That's who I want to be with you, just Daniel. Good, because the CEO version is kind of intimidating, and I'm not sure I'd like him very much. He's not very likable. But Daniel is. She leaned over, kissed his cheek quickly, then climbed out before he could respond. I'll text you later, she said, after my shift. I'll be waiting. She disappeared into her building. Daniel sat in his car for a moment, hand touching the spot where she'd kissed him, feeling something that had been frozen for 3 years finally start to thaw. He drove home. Ethan was at the kitchen table doing homework, the nanny reading a book nearby. How'd it go? Ethan asked without looking up from his math problems. Good. I think she kissed me. That got Ethan's attention. Like a real kiss? On the cheek. But yeah, real. Gross. Daniel laughed. Give it a few years. You'll change your mind. Doubt it. But Ethan was smiling. Does this mean she's your girlfriend? I don't know what she is yet. We're figuring it out. Okay, just remember what I said about surprises. I remember. The nanny left. Daniel and Ethan made dinner together. Spaghetti again, because apparently that was the only thing in Emma's recipe book they could execute without disaster. They ate at the table, talked about school and homework and the new video game Ethan had been watching other kids play at recess. It wasn't perfect. There were silences that felt awkward, moments where neither of them knew what to say. But it was real. And real was better than the careful distance they'd been maintaining. Later, after Ethan went to bed, Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Just finished my shift. You still up? Yeah, everything okay? Better than okay. I got offered a job today. Full-time. Benefits. Actual living wage. Not at your company, before you ask. A friend of Ruth's owns a small marketing firm, and they need an office manager. Ruth recommended me. That's amazing. Congratulations. Thanks. I'm terrified but also excited. Is that normal? Completely normal. When do you start? 2 weeks. Gives me time to wrap things up at both current jobs, which means I'll actually have evenings free. And weekends. I forgot what those were like. We should celebrate. Daniel Hayes, are you asking me on a date? I'm trying to. Not sure I remember how. Lucky for you, I'm not picky. Dinner? Nothing fancy. Somewhere we can actually talk. I know a place. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night works. Pick me up at 7? I'll be there. Daniel set his phone down, feeling something that might have been happiness trying to take root in his chest. It felt foreign, uncomfortable, like wearing new shoes that hadn't been broken in yet. But it also felt right. The next morning, he woke up early and made breakfast for Ethan. Actual breakfast, not just cereal. Scrambled eggs that were only slightly overcooked and toast that was more brown than black. Ethan stared at his plate. You made this? Don't sound so shocked. It's just weird. You never make breakfast. I'm trying new things. Is this because of the girlfriend? She's not my girlfriend yet, and no, this is because I'm trying to be a better dad. Ethan took a bite of eggs, chewed thoughtfully. These are pretty good. Thanks, buddy. They ate together, talked about the day ahead, made plans to try another recipe from Emma's book that weekend. Small things. Normal things. The kind of routine Daniel had convinced himself didn't matter when really it was all that mattered. At work, Marcus cornered him in his office before the first meeting. You look different, Marcus said. Different how? Less dead inside. It's unsettling. Daniel laughed. Thanks, I think. Things working out with Ava? Maybe. We're taking it slow. Good, because I hired someone else for the assistant position. Starts Monday. Very qualified, no personal entanglements. Exactly what we need. That's great. Marcus studied him. You really are okay with this, aren't you? With her not working here? Yeah, some things are more important than convenience. Look at you, learning emotional intelligence. Emma would be proud. The mention of his wife didn't sting the way it used to. Instead, it felt like acknowledgement. Like Marcus was recognizing that Daniel was finally starting to live up to the person Emma had believed he could be. Yeah, Daniel said. I think she would. That evening, Daniel picked Ava up at exactly 7. She dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, nothing fancy, which he appreciated. They weren't trying to impress each other anymore, just trying to be real. The restaurant he'd chosen was small, family-owned, the kind of place where the menu changed based on what was fresh, and the owner knew everyone by name. They ordered, talked, laughed at stupid things. Ava told him stories about her worst customers at the coffee shop. Daniel told her about the time he'd accidentally sent an email meant for Marcus to the entire company and spent a week dealing with the fallout. It felt easy, natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of just figuring it out. Halfway through dinner, Ava said, I need to tell you something. Daniel's stomach tightened. Okay. I'm still scared. Of this, of us, of everything. And I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to realize I'm not worth the effort, or for me to wake up and remember all the reasons this is a terrible idea. But I don't want to let that fear stop me from trying, because you're right, what we found was real. Messy and complicated and built on a foundation of misunderstandings, but real. And I think real is worth fighting for. Daniel reached across the table, took her hand. I'm scared too. I haven't let anyone this close since Emma died. Haven't wanted to. And now I do, and it terrifies me because I know what loss feels like, and I'm not sure I could survive it again. You survived it once. Barely. But you did, and you're still here. Still trying. That counts for something. They finished dinner, walked back to Daniel's car. Instead of driving straight to her apartment, he took a detour. Where are we going? Ava asked. Somewhere I want you to see. He drove to a small park on the edge of the city, pulled into an empty parking lot. The view from here looked out over the skyline, lights beginning to glow as evening turned to night. I used to come here with Emma, Daniel said. When we were dating, before everything got complicated with business and life. We'd sit in the car and talk for hours about nothing and everything. Why are you bringing me here? Because I want to stop keeping parts of my life separate. Emma was real. You're real. And I'm tired of pretending the past doesn't exist just because it's painful. Ava was quiet, looking out at the city. Tell me about her. Really tell me. Not the sanitized version, the real version. So Daniel did. He told her about meeting Emma in college, about their first date at a terrible Italian restaurant where the pasta was undercooked, and they laughed so hard the owner asked them to leave. About their wedding in her parents' backyard with 50 people and homemade decorations. About Ethan being born 6 weeks early and how Emma had been terrified and fierce and perfect all at once. He told her about the fights they'd had, the times he'd worked too much and she'd called him out, the compromises and the stubbornness and all the ways they'd been imperfect together, and he told her about the night she died. The phone call, the hospital, the moment he'd had to tell Ethan his mother wasn't coming home. By the time he finished, his voice was rough and Ava's eyes were wet. She sounds incredible, Ava said. She was. And you loved her. I did. I do. That doesn't go away just because she's gone. I don't want it to. Ava turned to face him. I don't want to replace her or compete with her memory. I just want to be part of your life as it is now, with all the messy history and the grief and the kid who doesn't like surprises. Daniel felt something break open in his chest, not pain, relief. I want that too, he said. They kissed. Not dramatic or movie perfect, just two broken people who'd found each other by accident and decided the accident was worth keeping. When they pulled apart, Ava said, I should probably meet him soon. Ethan, if this is going to be real, I need to meet the most important person in your life. He's going to grill you. He's 7, but he acts like he's 40. Good. I can handle being grilled. When? Whenever he's ready. You ask him. Let him decide. Kids should have agency in these things. Daniel drove her home, walked her to her door like they were teenagers instead of 2 adults with decades of baggage between them. Thank you for tonight, Ava said, for being honest about Emma, for letting me in. Thank you for not running when you had every reason to. I'm still here, still trying, still scared, but trying anyway. Me too. She kissed him again, quick and soft. Text me when you get home. I will. Daniel drove home feeling lighter than he had in years. When he got there, Ethan was still awake, reading in bed. You're up late, Daniel said from the doorway. Couldn't sleep. How was your date? Good. Really good. Ethan set his book down. Are you going to marry her? The question caught Daniel off guard. What? No, we just started dating. But you might. Eventually. Maybe. If things work out. Why? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, would she live here? With us? I don't know. That's pretty far in the future. We're taking things slow. But if she did, would I have to call her mom? Daniel crossed to the bed, sat down on the edge. Nobody, never. You have a mom. Emma will always be your mom. No one could ever replace her. But if you get married again, she'd kind of be like a stepmom or something. If that ever happens, and that's a big if, she'd be another person who cares about you. Not a replacement, an addition. Ethan processed this. Would I like her? I think so. But there's only one way to find out. Does she know about Mom? Yeah, I told her tonight. Everything. And she didn't run away? No, she stayed. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay, I guess I could meet her, just to see. No promises. No promises, Daniel agreed. Just meeting, seeing if you get along, and if you don't, we'll figure it out. When? This weekend, maybe? We could do something casual, get pizza, go to the park, nothing formal. Can I bring my skateboard? If you want. Okay. Ethan picked his book back up. But Dad? Yeah? I'm glad you're trying, with her and with me. It's better than how it was before. Daniel's throat tightened. Thanks, buddy. I'm trying my best. I know. That's why it's working. Daniel left Ethan to his reading and went to his own room. He pulled out his phone, sent a text to Ava. Ethan wants to meet you this weekend. Nothing formal, just pizza in the park. Are you up for it? Her response came quickly. Terrified, but yes. What do 7-year-olds like to talk about? Honestly, no idea. I'm still figuring that out myself. Well, then we'll figure it out together. Saturday afternoon? I can pick you up at 2. It's a date, or a meeting, or whatever this is. It's us, figuring it out. That's enough. Saturday arrived too fast and not fast enough. Daniel woke up nervous, which was ridiculous. He'd negotiated million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but the idea of Ava meeting Ethan made his hands shake. Ethan seemed equally nervous, changing his shirt 3 times and asking repeatedly if his hair looked okay. She's gonna like you, Daniel said. Just be yourself. What if being myself isn't enough? Then she's not right for us. But I think she is. They picked Ava up at 2. She climbed into the back seat next to Ethan, smiled at him. Hi, she said. I'm Ava. I'm Ethan. He looked at her seriously. Did my dad tell you I don't like surprises? He did? Good. Just wanted to make sure you knew. I appreciate the heads up. They drove to the park, got pizza from a food truck, spread a blanket on the grass and ate while Ethan quizzed Ava about everything from her favorite color to whether she thought skateboarding was cool. She answered every question honestly, admitted she'd never been on a skateboard but was willing to learn, said her favorite color was green because it reminded her of spring. Told him about growing up with a dad who was sick and how she'd learned to make the best of hard situations. Ethan listened with the intensity of a judge evaluating evidence. When they finished eating, he said, "Want to see me skateboard?" "I'd love to." He showed off, doing tricks that were probably dangerous and definitely gave Daniel minor heart attacks. But Ava watched and clapped and asked questions like she actually cared. After an hour, Ethan skated back over, breathless and happy. "She's okay," he announced to Daniel. "Just okay?" "Better than okay." She didn't pretend to know about skateboarding when she didn't, and she laughed at my jokes even though they weren't that funny. "They were pretty funny," Ava said. "See? She gets it." Ethan looked at his dad. "You can keep dating her." "Thanks for the permission," Daniel said, fighting a smile. "You're welcome." They stayed at the park until the sun started to set. On the drive back to Ava's apartment, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, head against the window. "He liked you," Daniel said quietly. "I liked him too. He's a good kid. He's been through a lot. So have you. So have I. We're all just trying our best." Daniel pulled up to her building. Ava glanced back at the sleeping Ethan. "I should let you get him home," she said. "Yeah." But neither of them moved to end the moment. "This is real, isn't it?" Ava said. "Not just the 2 of us figuring things out, but all 3 of us." "Yeah, it's real. I'm still scared." "Me too. But I'm also happy. Is that allowed? To be scared and happy at the same time? I think that's the only way anything real works." She leaned over, kissed him softly. "Thank you for letting me in, for introducing me to your son, for being brave enough to try this even though it's terrifying. Thank you for staying, for giving me chances I didn't deserve, for seeing past all the ways I screwed up to who I'm trying to be. That's what love does. It sees potential and chooses to believe in it." The word hung between them, love. Neither of them had said it before. "Is that what this is?" Daniel asked. "I don't know yet, but I think it could be. If we keep showing up, if we keep being honest, if we keep choosing each other even when it's hard. I can do that. So can I." Ava climbed out of the car, waved through the window at sleeping Ethan, then disappeared into her building. Daniel drove home, carried Ethan inside and up to bed without waking him. Then he went to his office, pulled out Emma's letter one last time. He'd read it so many times now that the creases were wearing thin, but the words still hit just as hard. Choose happiness, Daniel, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. He'd chosen, was still choosing, every day choosing to show up, be honest, risk the pain, because the alternative was a half-life of careful distance. And it was working, slowly, imperfectly, with setbacks and mistakes and moments of doubt. But it was working. Ethan was talking more, laughing more, starting to believe it was okay to need things. Daniel was feeling more, living more, starting to believe that moving forward didn't mean forgetting what came before. And Ava was there, present and real, and willing to build something new from the wreckage of how they'd started. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when the grief felt overwhelming or the fear too strong or the weight of trying to be better too much to carry. But they were carrying it together now. Three broken people learning to be whole by being honest about their damage instead of pretending it didn't exist. Daniel folded Emma's letter, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in the drawer where he kept the things that mattered. Then he pulled out his phone and sent a text to Ava. "Thank you for today, for meeting Ethan, for being patient with both of us while we figure this out." Her response came a few minutes later. "Thank you for trusting me with something so important. He's a great kid. You're doing better than you think." "I'm trying." "I know, that's what makes it work. I'll see you soon? Tomorrow. Coffee? My treat this time. You don't have to do that." "I know, but I want to. Let me take care of you sometimes. You don't always have to be the one giving." Daniel stared at that message, feeling something shift. He'd spent so long being the provider, the protector, the one who solved problems that he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone else carry weight. "Okay, tomorrow. Coffee. Your treat. It's a date." He set his phone down, walked through his house, still too big, still too empty, but starting to feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home. In the kitchen, Emma's recipe book sat on the counter, bookmarked to a page they'd try next. In the living room, Ethan's skateboard leaned against the wall. In his office, work that would always be there but no longer consumed every waking moment. And in his chest, something that had been frozen for 3 years continuing its slow, painful thaw. The doorbell rang, unexpected at this hour. Daniel answered it to find Marcus standing on his porch holding a bottle of wine. "I was in the neighborhood," Marcus said, which was obviously a lie given that he lived across town. "Come in." They sat in the living room. Marcus poured wine into glasses Daniel retrieved from the kitchen. "Emma would have been happy," Marcus said after a long silence. "About Ava. About you finally living again." "How do you know?" "Because she told me, right before she died. Made me promise to kick your ass if you tried to turn into some tragic widower who never moved on." Marcus took a drink. "Said you'd probably try to honor her memory by preserving everything exactly as it was. That you'd convince yourself that was loyalty, when really it was fear. She knew me pretty well. She loved you. There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking wine, remembering someone they'd both lost. "I'm happy," Daniel said eventually. "Is that allowed? To be happy when she's gone?" "That's exactly what she wanted. For you to keep living, keep loving, keep being human instead of a ghost haunting his own life. It feels like betrayal sometimes." "Love isn't betrayal. It's evolution. What you had with Emma doesn't disappear just because you're building something with Ava. It just changes shape." Daniel thought about that, about how grief didn't have an expiration date, but could coexist with joy. How honoring Emma's memory didn't mean stopping his life. How love could grow instead of just getting replaced. "Thanks," he said, "for keeping your promise, for kicking my ass when I needed it. That's what friends do." Marcus left an hour later. Daniel checked on Ethan one more time, then went to bed and actually slept through the night for the first time in recent memory. The next morning, he met Ava at the coffee shop. Not the one where she worked, but a different place she'd suggested. They sat by the window, drinking coffee she'd insisted on paying for, watching the city wake up around them. "I've been thinking," Ava said, "about what happens next." "Yeah?" "I start my new job in 2 weeks, which means I'll have stability for the first time in forever. Real income, benefits, a life that's not just survival." "That's good." "It is. But it also means I need to figure out what I actually want, not what I can afford, not what makes sense, what I actually want." Daniel waited, sensing this was important. "I want this," Ava said, gesturing between them. "You and me, figuring it out together. I want to meet Ethan more, learn his favorite foods and his bad jokes and all the things that make him who he is. I want to be part of your life in a real way, not just dates and careful moments, the messy everyday parts too." "I want that too." "Good. Because I'm all in. Still scared, but all in. And I need you to be all in too. Not halfway, not protected, all the way in. Daniel reached across the table, took both her hands. I'm in, all the way. No more holding back. No more protecting myself at your expense. Just honest, messy, real. Promise? Promise. They finished their coffee, walked through the city with no destination, just moving together. At some point, Ava's hand found his, and they walked like that, holding on. Two people who'd found each other by accident and chosen each other on purpose. Life didn't magically fix itself. Daniel still had bad days where the grief felt overwhelming. Ethan still had moments of withdrawal when the loss of his mother hit hard. Ava still struggled with money and self-doubt and all the scars that came from years of just surviving. But they faced it together now. Honestly. Without pretending things were perfect or easy or anything other than what they were. And somehow, in the honesty and the mess and the willingness to keep showing up even when it was hard, they found something that felt like home. Not the place, not the circumstances, but each other. Three broken people learning to be whole by admitting they were broken and choosing to build something anyway. It wasn't the story Daniel had imagined when he sat alone in that restaurant expecting a business meeting. Wasn't what Ava had expected when she showed up to a blind date that wasn't real. But it was better than either of them had hoped for. Because it was real. Built on honesty and risk and the willingness to choose happiness even when it was scary. Especially when it was scary. And as they walked through the city, hands clasped, futures uncertain but faces forward, Daniel thought about Emma's letter one more time. Choose happiness. He had. Was still choosing, every single day. And for the first time in 3 years, that choice didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like coming home.